They left her to die in the snow because she didn't look like the kind of woman worth saving. Mara Ellison wasn't supposed to survive the Dakota winter. Too soft, too big, too different for the brutal frontier. But when that cabin door swung open and a scarred stranger pulled her from death's grip without a single word of judgment, everything she thought she knew about worthiness shattered. What happens next will prove that the most dangerous thing in the wilderness isn't wolves or outlaws. It's underestimating the wrong woman. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The supply station at Crow's Bridge smelled like tobacco, wet leather, and masculine contempt. Mara Ellison stood near the potbelly stove, trying to disappear into the crowd of travelers waiting out the weather delay. Outside, November sleet hammered the windows with the sound of thrown gravel. Inside, men clustered around barrels and card tables, their laughter cutting through the room like axe blades. She'd made the mistake of asking about the wagon departure time. "Well now," the station manager had said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Reckon we'll need to reinforce them wagon springs before we load you up, ma'am." The room erupted. Not polite chuckles, full-throated laughter that made her skin burn. Mara kept her eyes on the stove. She'd learned young that responding only made it worse. Let them laugh. Let them think whatever they wanted. She'd be in Iron Hollow by week's end, starting her teaching position, and these men would fade into nothing more than an ugly memory. "Frank, you charging her double fare?" someone called out. "Should charge triple," another voice added. "Gonna snap that axle clean through." Frank, the wagon driver, a wiry man with a face like dried jerky, scratched his beard. "Now, boys, let's not— Come on, Frank. You seen the size of her? That ain't no frontier woman. That's 3 frontier women stacked up and sewn together." More laughter, louder this time. Mara's hands curled into fists inside her coat pockets. She was 24 years old and had heard variations of these jokes since childhood. Fat girl, Big Mara, the girl who ate the schoolhouse. She'd survived every single insult by building walls so thick that nothing could reach her anymore. Or so she told herself. "I'll pay whatever fare is required," she said quietly, meeting Frank's eyes. "I have my contract. I'm expected in Iron Hollow." Frank shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, it ain't about the money." "Then what's it about?" The room went quiet. Not respectful quiet, predatory quiet, like wolves when they stop circling and start calculating. A man near the card table spoke up. He was broad-shouldered, his beard streaked with gray. "It's about reality, sweetheart. Iron Hollow's hard country. You think they want some oversized schoolmarm who can't hardly walk a mile without wheezing? I can walk just fine. Can you chop wood, haul water, defend yourself when the Lakota come raiding?" "The Lakota aren't— You gonna lecture me about Indians?" He stood up now, and Mara noticed the knife on his belt. "I lost my brother to a war party 3 winters back. Don't you dare tell me what they are or ain't." Mara's throat tightened. This wasn't about her weight anymore. This was about her being an outsider, a woman, someone who represented everything these men had decided didn't belong. "I'm going to Iron Hollow," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "With or without your approval." Frank sighed. "Wagon leaves in an hour. You can ride, but I ain't making promises about comfort." "I don't need comfort. I need transportation." The broad-shouldered man snorted. "You need a miracle, is what you need. But hell, it's your funeral." Mara turned away before he could see the tears threatening to spill. She'd cried enough over men like him. She wouldn't give them another drop. The wagon was worse than she'd imagined. Frank had loaded her in the back with supply crates and 2 other passengers, a hollow-eyed woman named Ruth, who clutched a carpet bag and never spoke, and a teenage boy with a clubfoot who kept his head down like he was used to being invisible too. Mara tried to arrange herself on the narrow bench, but every bump sent her sliding into Ruth, who flinched away like Mara carried disease. "Sorry," Mara whispered. Ruth said nothing. The boy, his name was Thomas, Frank had mentioned, glanced at her once with something that might have been sympathy before looking away. They rolled out of Crow's Bridge into the teeth of the coming storm. By noon, the sleet had turned to snow. Fat, wet flakes that stuck to everything and turned the trail into a slick mess. Frank cursed steadily from the driver's seat, his voice barely audible over the wind. Mara pulled her coat tighter. She'd brought her warmest clothing, but nothing in Philadelphia had prepared her for this kind of cold. It didn't just chill, it invaded, seeped through fabric and flesh until it felt like her bones were made of ice. "How much farther?" she called forward. "Too far," Frank shouted back. "And getting worse." Ruth whimpered softly. Thomas tucked his hands under his arms. Mara tried to calculate. According to the map she'd studied, Iron Hollow was maybe 15 miles from Crow's Bridge. In good weather, that was a half-day journey. In this? The wagon lurched sideways. Frank swore, really swore this time, words Mara had only heard in the worst Philadelphia dockyards. The whole rig tilted, and for a sickening moment, Mara thought they were going over. Then the wheels caught traction, and they slammed back down. "Frank!" Ruth cried. "Frank, we have to stop!" "Can't stop!" Frank yelled. "We stop! We freeze!" But 20 minutes later, they stopped anyway. The front axle cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The wagon lurched forward, nose down, and everything not tied down went sliding. Mara grabbed for a crate handle and missed. She hit the forward bench hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. When she could breathe again, Frank was already out in the snow, assessing the damage. "How bad?" Thomas asked, his voice high and scared. Frank's answer came back muffled and profane. Mara climbed down from the wagon, her skirts immediately soaking up snow. The wind hit her like a physical blow and she staggered. "Get back in," Frank snapped. "Can you fix it?" "Does it look like I can fix it?" He gestured at the axle. Split clean through, one wheel canted at an angle that spoke of permanent damage. "We're stuck." "Then what do we do?" Frank was already moving, unhitching the horses. "I take one horse, ride for help. You three stay with the wagon, stay warm as you can." "You're leaving us?" Ruth's voice climbed toward panic. "I ain't got a choice. It's 5 miles back to Crow's Bridge, maybe 6 in this mess. I can make it on horseback. You can't." "What about Iron Hollow?" Mara asked. "That's closer, isn't it?" Frank stopped, looked at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. "You don't know where you are, do you?" "What do you mean?" "We ain't on the Iron Hollow Road anymore. That fork was 2 miles back. I took the southern route to avoid the river crossing, but that was before the storm got bad." He shook his head. "Iron Hollow's north and east from here, maybe 10 miles, maybe more." Mara's stomach dropped. "You took the wrong road?" "I took the safer road. Difference is I didn't expect the axle to snap." He finished with the horses, swung up onto the saddle. "Stay put. I'll be back with help soon as I can." "How soon?" Thomas asked. Frank didn't answer. He kicked the horse forward and vanished into the white. For a long moment, the three of them just stood there. Then Ruth started crying. They made it 4 hours. The wagon provided some shelter, but not enough. The wind found every gap in the canvas, every crack in the wood. Mara tried to organize. They had blankets in the supply crates, some dried food, even a small lantern. But Ruth was near hysterics, and Thomas's lips were turning blue. "We have to stay calm," Mara said, wrapping a blanket around Thomas's shoulders. "Frank will come back." "He won't," Ruth whispered. "We're going to die here." "We are not going to die." But even as she said it, Mara felt the cold settling deeper. Her fingers were numb. Her toes had stopped hurting, which she knew was worse than pain. Thomas coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Mara made a decision. "There was a cabin," she said. "About a mile back. I saw smoke from the chimney." Ruth looked up, eyes red. "Frank said to stay." "Frank's not here. And if we stay, Thomas won't make it through the night." She could see Ruth calculating. The older woman looked at Thomas, at his blue lips and shaking hands, and something crumbled in her face. "I can't walk a mile," Ruth said flatly. "My hip, it's bad even in good weather." Mara felt the weight of choice settle on her shoulders. She could stay, and they'd all freeze. She could take Thomas and leave Ruth, which was unthinkable. Or she could go alone, get help, and pray she made it back in time. "I'll go," she said. "I'll bring help." "You?" Ruth's voice carried that familiar edge of doubt. "You can barely—" "I can walk a mile." Mara cut her off, harder than she'd intended. "I'm going. Keep Thomas warm. I'll be back." She didn't wait for Ruth to argue. She climbed down from the wagon and started walking. She'd lied about the cabin being a mile away. It was closer to 2, and the smoke she'd seen had been a guess at best. But Mara had learned something in her 24 years. Sometimes you had to lie to make people believe survival was possible. The snow was knee-deep in places, her skirts dragged, heavy and wet, and within minutes her legs were burning. But she kept moving, left foot, right foot. Don't think about the cold. Don't think about the wind. Don't think about the men at Crow's Bridge laughing about how the fat girl would never make it. I'll make it. I'll make it because I have to. Her breath came in gasps. Her chest ached, but she kept moving. 20 minutes in, she fell for the first time. Her boot caught on something buried in the snow, and she went down hard, face first, into the white. For a moment, she just lay there, tasting blood from a split lip. Get up. She got up. 30 minutes in, she couldn't feel her hands anymore. She'd lost one glove somewhere, and the other was soaked through. She tucked both hands under her arms and kept walking. Left foot, right foot. 40 minutes in, she started to doubt. There was no cabin. She'd imagined the smoke. She was going to die out here, frozen solid, and in the spring someone would find her body and say, "Told you she couldn't make it." No, no. She kept walking, and then, impossibly, she saw it. A dark shape through the snow, low and solid, a cabin. Mara tried to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. She stumbled forward, half crawling the last few yards, and collapsed against the door. Her frozen fist pounded wood. "Help," she managed. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please." Nothing. She pounded again, harder, using the last of her strength. "Please. There's a boy. He's dying. Please." The door opened. Mara fell forward into warmth and light, and the last thing she saw before the darkness took her was a man's face, scarred and bearded, and looking at her like she was a ghost. She woke to heat. Blessed, overwhelming heat that felt like it was burning her alive. Mara gasped and tried to sit up, but a hand pressed her shoulder back down. "Easy." A man's voice, deep and rough. "Don't move yet." Her vision cleared slowly. She was lying on a bed, an actual bed with a straw mattress and wool blankets. A fireplace roared nearby, and she realized, with distant horror, that someone had removed her wet coat and boots. "My clothes, drying by the fire. You were soaked through." Mara turned her head and got her first clear look at her rescuer. He was massive. Not fat, just built on a scale that made the cabin feel smaller. Broad shoulders, arms thick with muscle, hands that looked like they could snap wood without effort. His face was hard angles and old scars, one particularly nasty line running from his left temple down to his jaw. Dark hair, dark eyes, and a beard that was more practical than decorative. He looked like violence given human form, and he was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "There's a boy," Mara said, memory flooding back. "Thomas. And a woman, Ruth. The wagon, it broke down maybe 2 miles from here. They're freezing." The man stood without a word, moving toward a heavy coat hanging by the door. "You're going?" Mara asked. "Wagon south on the trail?" "Yes, broken axle. They can't move." He nodded once, shrugged into the coat. Then he paused, looked back at her. "You walked 2 miles in that storm?" "I didn't have a choice." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, more like recognition, like he'd seen something he hadn't expected. "Name's Caleb," he said. "Caleb Boone. You stay here, stay warm. I'll bring your people back." "I can help." "You can barely stand." He said it flatly, a statement of fact without judgment. "Rest. I'll handle it." And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a solid thunk that shut out the storm. Mara lay back against the pillows, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and relief, and something else she couldn't name. She'd made it. Against every expectation, every cruel word, every doubt, she'd made it. But as she stared at the rough-hewn ceiling beams, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was just beginning. Caleb returned 3 hours later with Thomas draped across his saddle and Ruth stumbling along behind, wrapped in blankets. Mara had managed to stand by then, though her legs still felt like water. She helped Caleb carry Thomas to the second bed. She hadn't noticed it before, tucked in the cabin's far corner, and Ruth collapsed into a chair by the fire without a word. "He gonna make it?" Mara asked, looking at Thomas's pale face. "If he warms up slow and don't catch pneumonia." Caleb was already moving, efficient and calm, stoking the fire higher, hanging wet clothes, checking Thomas's breathing. "You did good getting here." Mara blinked. "What?" "Most people would have stayed with the wagon, frozen to death, waiting for help that might not come." He glanced at her, and for the first time she saw something like approval in those dark eyes. You moved. That saved his life. She didn't know what to say to that. Men didn't usually compliment her. They certainly didn't look at her like she'd done something worth respecting. The wagon driver, she managed, found his tracks heading back toward Crow's Bridge. He'll make it or he won't. Not much we can do either way. Caleb pulled a pot off the fire, started ladling something that smelled like heaven. Stew's simple, but it's hot. Get some in you. Mara took the bowl he offered and their fingers brushed. His hands were scarred and calloused, marked by a life of hard work. Hers were soft by comparison. City soft, teacher soft. She expected him to notice, to comment, to make some remark about the difference between them. He didn't. He just moved on to serve Ruth, who accepted the bowl without looking up. They ate in silence. The stew was venison and root vegetables, undersalted but filling. Mara hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite hit her stomach. "How long before we can leave?" Ruth asked finally. Her voice was dull, defeated. "Storm's getting worse," Caleb said. "Could be days before the trail's passable." "Days?" Ruth's head snapped up. "I can't stay here for days. I have to get to Iron Hollow. I'm expected—" "You're expected alive," Caleb said flatly. "Dead folks don't keep appointments." Ruth's mouth opened and closed. Then she started crying again, quietly, into her hands. Mara wanted to comfort her but didn't know how. She'd never been good at that kind of thing. So instead, she finished her stew and tried not to think about what being snowbound in a stranger's cabin for days might mean. Caleb stood, started gathering blankets. "Boy needs to stay warm. I'll sleep by the fire. You two take the beds." "Where will you sleep?" Mara asked. "Told you. By the fire." "That's not— I've slept in worse places, ma'am." He said it with a finality that shut down argument. "Get some rest. We'll figure the rest out in the morning." Mara wanted to protest, wanted to insist on sharing the floor or taking a shift or something that wouldn't make her feel like a burden. But exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and she barely made it to the bed before sleep dragged her under. Her last thought was of the man who'd pulled her from the snow without hesitation, without judgment, without once looking at her like she was the wrong kind of woman for anything. She woke to the sound of wind howling like a living thing. The cabin was dark except for firelight, and for a disoriented moment, Mara thought she was back in Philadelphia in her cramped boarding house room. Then memory returned and she sat up, heart pounding. Thomas was breathing steadily in the other bed. Ruth was a motionless lump under blankets, and Caleb was at the window, staring out into the storm. "How bad?" Mara asked softly. He didn't turn. "Bad enough. Won't be traveling tomorrow." Mara slipped out of bed, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, and joined him at the window. She couldn't see anything but white. Solid, impenetrable white. "I've never seen snow like this," she said. "Dakota winter. Kills people who don't respect it." "That why you live out here alone?" Now he did look at her, one eyebrow raised. "You always this direct?" "I'm from Philadelphia. We don't do subtle." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair enough. And yeah, I like the solitude. People tend to complicate things." "Present company accepted?" "Present company was freezing to death. Different situation." Mara studied him in the firelight. Up close, the scars were even more pronounced. Not just the one on his face. His hands were marked too, and she caught a glimpse of another scar disappearing under his collar. These weren't farm accidents. These were fight scars. "You were in the war," she said. Not a question. His jaw tightened. "Most men my age were." "Which side?" "Does it matter?" "I suppose not." They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, the wind shrieked. "Why Iron Hollow?" Caleb asked suddenly. "City woman like you. Could have stayed east, taught in a real school." "Iron Hollow has a real school." "You know what I mean." Mara considered lying, making up something noble about frontier education or civic duty. But something about this man, about the way he'd looked at her without flinching, made her want to tell the truth. "Because nobody in Philadelphia would hire me," she said. "I applied to 16 schools. 16. Every single one found a reason to pass. Too young, too inexperienced, too—" She gestured at herself. "Too obvious." Caleb's eyes didn't drop to her body. He kept his gaze on her face. "Their loss." "That's kind of you to say?" "It's not kindness. It's observation." He turned back to the window. You walked 2 miles through a blizzard to save a boy you barely knew. How many of those Philadelphia teachers would have done that? Mara had no answer for that. Get some sleep, Caleb said. Long day tomorrow. Doing what? Surviving. Morning brought no relief from the storm. If anything, it was worse. The snow had drifted against the cabin door so high that Caleb had to dig them out just to get outside. Mara watched through the window as he worked, his breath steaming in the brutal cold. Ruth was in a dark mood, snapping at everything. Thomas was feverish, his forehead hot to the touch. Mara did what she could, cool cloths, water when he'd take it, but she wasn't a nurse. He needs a doctor, Ruth said for the dozenth time. There's no doctor within 20 miles, Mara replied, keeping her voice level. We do what we can. What you can isn't enough. The words stung, but Mara bit back her response. Ruth was scared. They all were. Caleb came back in carrying an armload of firewood, snow crusted in his beard. How's the boy? Worse, Mara said quietly. Caleb set down the wood and moved to Thomas's bedside. He checked the boy's pulse, his breathing, then went to a shelf and started pulling down jars. What are you doing? Ruth demanded. Willow bark tea. Brings down fever. He glanced at Mara. You know how to brew tea? Yes. Then brew this. Steep it strong. Get him to drink as much as he can keep down. Mara took the jar and got to work. She'd helped her mother brew medicinal teas during Philadelphia's cholera outbreak 3 years back. The motions came back easily. Measure, steep, strain. When she brought the cup to Thomas, Caleb was already propping the boy up. Drink, he said, not unkindly. I know it tastes like dirt. Drink anyway. Thomas managed 3 swallows before he gagged. That's good, Caleb said. Rest now. He laid the boy back down with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his size. Mara found herself staring, this massive, scarred man handling a sick child like spun glass. You've done this before, she said. Had younger brothers. Lost one to fever when he was about Thomas's age. Caleb straightened, his expression carefully neutral. Willow bark might have saved him if I'd known about it then. The grief in those words was old but not forgotten. Mara recognized it. She'd lost her own brother to scarlet fever when she was 12. I'm sorry, she said, long time ago. But the way he said it told her it wasn't long enough. The day crawled past. Mara found herself falling into a rhythm with Caleb. He'd do something. Bank the fire, check the food stores, melt snow for water, and she'd step in to help without being asked. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. It was the kind of comfortable silence she'd never experienced with anyone before. Ruth, meanwhile, withdrew into herself. She sat by the fire, staring at nothing, occasionally muttering about missed appointments and ruined plans. By afternoon, Thomas's fever broke. He's going to be okay, Mara said, relief flooding through her. Caleb nodded. Kid's tough, tougher than he looks. Aren't we all? He gave her a look, sharp and assessing. Some more than others. That evening, Caleb made dinner, cornbread and beans, simple but filling. They ate by firelight while the storm continued its assault outside. How long you been out here? Mara asked. 5 years. Built this place myself. It's well made. Has to be. Winter'll find any weakness and exploit it. He paused. Same as people. That why you left civilization? Part of it. What's the other part? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then, you ever do something you can't take back? Something that changes who you are? Mara thought about the years of humiliation, the cruel words that had carved themselves into her soul, the person she'd had to become to survive. Yes, she said simply. He nodded slowly. Then you understand why a man might want to start over. Alone. Except you're not alone right now. No, he agreed. I'm not. Their eyes met across the fire, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. Two people who'd been broken by the world in different ways, now sharing space and survival. Ruth cleared her throat loudly. If you two are done philosophizing, I'd like to know when we can leave this godforsaken place. When the storm clears, Caleb said evenly. And when will that be? When it clears. Ruth made a disgusted sound and turned away. Mara almost smiled. There was something satisfying about Caleb's refusal to be bullied or hurried. He operated on his own time, by his own rules, and the world could adjust or not. "Tell me about Iron Hollow," she said. "You must know it if you live this close." "Know of it. Don't go there much." "Why not?" "Towns ask questions. I don't like questions. I'm asking questions right now." "You're different." "How?" He looked at her again, and this time his expression was something close to soft. "You're not asking to judge. You're asking because you want to know. There's a difference." Mara felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "I suppose that's fair." "Iron Hollow's a decent town," Caleb continued. "Rough, like all frontier towns. Got a store, a church, a saloon, few dozen families. They'll work you hard, but they'll treat you fair. Mostly." "Mostly?" "Every town's got its share of fools and bastards. Iron Hollow's no different." "Good to know." They fell silent again. Outside, the wind had dropped to a low moan. The worst of the storm might be passing. "You'll do fine there," Caleb said suddenly. Mara blinked. "What makes you say that?" "Because you're still here, still breathing, still fighting." He stood, started banking the fire for the night. "That's all the frontier really asks, that you don't quit." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to her in years. Mara wanted to respond, to thank him, to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. So she just nodded and hoped he understood. From the look in his eyes, he did. The storm broke on the third day. Mara woke to silence, real silence, not the muffled roar of wind and snow. She sat up and saw sunlight streaming through the window, bright and clean. Caleb was already up, checking the door. "Trail should be passable by noon. I'll take you to Iron Hollow." "All of us?" Ruth asked, suddenly alert. "All of you." Ruth looked like she wanted to cry with relief. Thomas, still weak but improving, managed to smile. Mara felt a strange tug in her chest. She should be relieved too. Should be eager to finally reach her destination and start her new life. Instead, she felt something uncomfortably close to disappointment. The morning passed in a flurry of preparation. Caleb readied his wagon, smaller and sturdier than Frank's, while Mara helped Ruth pack their things. Thomas moved slowly but steadily, his color much improved. By noon they were loaded and ready. Mara took one last look at the cabin. It wasn't much. Rough walls, a dirt floor, furniture that was purely functional. But it had been sanctuary when she'd needed it most. And the man who lived here. She turned and found Caleb watching her. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes, thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet. Still got 10 miles to go." But the journey to Iron Hollow was easy compared to what they'd endured. The sun was bright, the air cold but still, and the trail, though snow-covered, was clear enough to follow. They made good time. Ruth dozed in the back. Thomas watched the landscape with wide eyes, like he'd never seen sunshine before. And Mara sat up front next to Caleb, close enough that their shoulders brushed with every bump in the trail. "You'll come visit," she said. It wasn't a question. "Town and I don't mix well." "You mixed fine with us." "That was survival, different thing." "Is it though?" He glanced at her sideways. "You're persistent." "I'm a teacher. It's in the job description." "Then I'll give you a lesson. Some men are better left alone." "Why?" "Because they're dangerous." Mara studied his profile, the hard lines, the scars, the way his hands gripped the reins with the easy confidence of someone who'd handled far more dangerous things. "I don't believe you're dangerous," she said. "Then you don't know me well enough." "Maybe I'd like to." The words hung in the air between them. Caleb's jaw tightened, and for a moment Mara thought she'd gone too far, pushed too hard. Then he said quietly, "You might regret that." "I'll take my chances." They rode in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence. Charged. Alive with possibility and risk, and something neither of them wanted to name. Iron Hollow appeared over a rise just before sunset. It was smaller than Mara had imagined. Maybe 30 buildings clustered around a single main street. Wooden structures, most of them, with a few stone foundations. Smoke rose from chimneys. Horses stood hitched outside the saloon. Children played in the snow despite the cold. It looked like every other frontier town Mara had seen in newspapers and dime novels. It looked like home. "There's the school," Caleb said, pointing to a white building at the far end of town. "Reverend Marsh runs it. He'll be expecting you." Thank you, Mara said. For everything. You said that already. It bears repeating. He brought the wagon to a stop in front of the general store. A few townspeople had stopped to stare. Frontier towns being what they were, strangers always drew attention. Mara climbed down, her legs unsteady after 3 days of enforced rest. Ruth and Thomas followed, Ruth already scanning the street like she was planning her escape. Caleb handed down their bags. When he passed Mara hers, their hands touched again. Good luck, Miss Ellison, he said. Mara, please. Mara, then? She wanted to say more, wanted to ask him to stay, to have dinner, to tell her more about himself in this hard country and what had carved those scars into his skin. Instead, she just said, Goodbye, Caleb. He tipped his hat, clicked to the horses, and drove away. Mara watched until he disappeared around a corner, then turned to face her new life. A woman was approaching. Tall, elegant, dressed in clothes that were far too fine for a frontier town. She had the kind of beauty that turned heads, perfect features, smooth skin, hair done up in an elaborate style. She looked at Mara with barely concealed disdain. You must be the new teacher, she said. Her voice was cultured, Eastern. I'm Lydia Crane. My father owns the general store. Mara Ellison, pleased to meet you. I'm sure. Lydia's eyes swept over Mara's travel-stained dress, her wind-burned face, her size. Well, you've certainly had quite a journey. Reverend Marsh is at the church. I'll show you the way. She turned and started walking without checking if Mara followed. Mara did, because what choice did she have? But as they walked through Iron Hollow's main street, she felt eyes on her, curious eyes, judgmental eyes. The same eyes she'd faced in Philadelphia, at Crow's Bridge, in every place that had decided she didn't fit. This was her new home. These were her new neighbors. And from the looks on their faces, she was going to have to fight for every inch of acceptance she'd hoped to find here. Behind her, Ruth muttered something about typical frontier hospitality, and Thomas coughed. Ahead, Lydia walked with the confidence of someone who'd never been told she didn't belong. And somewhere beyond the town limits, Caleb Boone was riding back to his solitary cabin, leaving Mara to face this alone. She squared her shoulders. She'd survived a blizzard, walked 2 miles through snow to save a boy's life, and spent 3 days in a stranger's cabin without losing her nerve. She could survive Iron Hollow. She would survive Iron Hollow, even if it killed her trying. Reverend Marsh was nothing like Mara expected. She'd braced herself for another Lydia Crane, someone who'd take one look at her and find her wanting. Instead, the man who greeted her at the church steps was small and round, with spectacles that kept sliding down his nose and a smile that seemed genuine. Miss Ellison, thank heavens you made it safely. We heard about the storm. Frank sent word from Crow's Bridge that you might be delayed, but we had no idea. He trailed off, seeming to notice her disheveled state for the first time. My word, you look like you've been through a war. Just a blizzard, Mara said, and a broken wagon. Well, you're here now, and that's what matters. Come, come. Let me show you to your quarters. They're modest, but I think you'll find them comfortable enough. Lydia made a small noise that might have been a snort. The Reverend either didn't hear or chose to ignore it. The teacher's quarters were attached to the schoolhouse, a single room with a bed, a stove, a table, and not much else. But it was clean and the roof looked sound, which was more than Mara had dared hope for. Classes start Monday, Reverend Marsh said. We have 19 students, ages 6 to 14. Most can read at least a little, though their writing needs work, and their arithmetic, well, let's just say the previous teacher wasn't strong in mathematics. What happened to the previous teacher? Mr. Hensley? Oh, he married a widow from the next county and moved away. Left us rather in the lurch, I'm afraid. The Reverend adjusted his spectacles. You'll do better, I'm sure. You come highly recommended. Mara doubted that, given how desperate she'd been to find any position at all, but she wasn't about to argue. I'll do my best, she said. I'm certain you will. Now, there's a community supper tonight at the church hall. Nothing fancy, just a chance for folks to meet you. 6 o'clock, don't be late. He bustled off, leaving Mara alone in her new home. She sat on the bed and it creaked alarmingly. The mattress was thin and lumpy. The stove needed cleaning. The single window looked out onto the back of the general store. It was perfect. For the first time in 3 days, Mara let herself relax. She'd made it. Against every odd, every obstacle, every person who told her she wouldn't, she'd made it. Now she just had to survive what came next. The community supper was exactly as awkward as Mara had feared. She arrived at 6 to find the church hall already crowded with families. Long tables had been set up, laden with food that smelled better than anything Mara had eaten since leaving Philadelphia. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, pies that made her mouth water. But the moment she walked in, conversation died. Every head turned, every eye assessed. Mara felt the weight of their judgment like a physical thing, pressing down on her shoulders. Then Reverend Marsh was there, taking her elbow, guiding her forward. "Everyone, this is Miss Mara Ellison, our new teacher. I trust you'll all make her feel welcome." The silence stretched for another beat. Then a woman near the back called out, "Welcome to Iron Hollow, Miss Ellison." Others echoed her, some more enthusiastically than others, and the spell broke. People returned to their conversations, though Mara caught more than a few glances thrown her way. She filled a plate, taking smaller portions than she wanted, hyper-aware of being watched, and found a seat at the end of one table. A middle-aged woman with flour on her apron sat down across from her. "Sarah Bennett," the woman said, "I run the boarding house, such as it is. You need anything, you come find me." "Thank you," Mara said. "That's kind. Ain't kindness, just practical. We don't get many teachers out here willing to stay. Be a shame if you left because nobody bothered to help you settle in." It was blunt, but Mara appreciated the honesty. "I'm not planning to leave," she said. "We'll see." Sarah's eyes weren't unkind, just realistic. Frontier's hard on everyone, but it's especially hard on women who aren't used to it. "I walked 2 miles through a blizzard to get here. I think I can handle hard." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "That was you?" Caleb Boone brought in a woman and a boy half frozen. Word was the woman saved the boy's life. "I just walked to find help." "In a blizzard, in the dark, without knowing where you were going." Sarah leaned back, reassessing. "Maybe you'll stick after all." A man sat down next to Sarah, tall and rangy, with the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors. "This the teacher?" "James, mind your manners," Sarah said. "Miss Ellison, this is my husband." James nodded at Mara. "You know anything about numbers? Because our oldest, Emma, she's struggling with division, and I'll be damned if I can help her." "I can certainly try," Mara said. "Good enough." James grabbed a chicken leg off his plate and bit into it. "You settling in all right? Need anything fixed?" "The stove in my room could use cleaning." "I'll send Emma over tomorrow with tools. She's good with her hands, that one. Better than most boys." Mar felt something in her chest loosen. These people weren't warm exactly, but they weren't cruel either. They were practical, direct, and willing to help as long as she proved she could hold her own. She could work with that. The meal continued. Mara met more families, the Johnsons, who ran the stable, the Carltons, who had a farm east of town, the Pratts, whose youngest son would be in her class. They were polite, if reserved. A few asked about her journey. Several mentioned Caleb Boone with a wariness that made Mara curious. "He doesn't come to town much," Sarah said when Mara asked. "Keeps to himself. Some folks think he's running from something." "Like what?" Sarah shrugged. "Could be anything. War, law, bad memories. Out here, people don't ask too many questions about a man's past. But they'll judge him for it anyway." "That's just human nature, Miss Ellison." Mara supposed it was. She was finishing her pie when Lydia Crane appeared, flanked by 2 other young women who looked at Mara like she was a curiosity in a traveling show. "Miss Ellison," Lydia said, her voice carrying across the table. "I wanted to introduce you to some of Iron Hollow's more established residents. This is Catherine Worth and Eleanor Hayes." Both women nodded. Catherine had the pinched look of someone who'd recently sucked a lemon. Eleanor at least managed a smile. "We run the Ladies' Society," Lydia continued. "We organize social events, charitable work, that sort of thing. You're welcome to join, of course." The "of course" made it clear that Lydia expected Mara to decline. "I'd be happy to," Mara said pleasantly. Lydia's smile froze. "Oh, well, that's lovely. We meet Thursdays at 2, at my father's store. I'll be there." Catherine and Eleanor exchanged glances. Lydia recovered quickly, her smile returning with an edge sharp enough to cut. "Wonderful. I'm sure you'll bring a unique perspective to our discussions." She glanced at Mara's plate, still half full, though Mara had been picking at it. "Do try the apple pie before you leave. Mrs. Carlton makes the best in 3 counties. Though I suppose you've already sampled everything. The implication was clear. Mara felt heat rise in her face, but kept her expression neutral. The pie is excellent, she said, as is the company. Lydia's eyes narrowed slightly, like she was trying to decide if she'd been insulted. Then she smiled again, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and swept away with her entourage. Sarah Bennett snorted. Don't mind Lydia. She's had her nose out of joint ever since her beau ran off with a woman from the next county. Makes her snippy. I'll keep that in mind, Mara said. Though fair warning, Lydia's daddy owns half the businesses in town, and the other half owe him money. Crossing her ain't smart. I'm not trying to cross anyone. I just want to teach. Then you'll be fine. Sarah stood, collecting plates. But watch yourself around her. Pretty girls with mean streaks are more dangerous than wolves. Mara thought about that as she walked back to her quarters later that night. The temperature had dropped, and her breath plumed in the air. Above, stars glittered like ice chips scattered across black velvet. Iron Hollow was quiet. A dog barked somewhere. A baby cried. Normal sounds of normal life. Mara had wanted normal for so long. But standing in the cold darkness of a frontier town, she wondered if normal was even possible for someone like her. Monday morning arrived with the weight of expectation. Mara woke before dawn, too nervous to sleep. She dressed in her best teaching dress, navy blue with a high collar, professional and modest, and spent 20 minutes trying to tame her hair into something presentable. By 8 o'clock, she was ready. By 8:15, she was pacing. By 8:30, when the first student arrived, her hands were shaking. The girl was maybe 10, with blonde braids and a suspicious expression. You the new teacher? I am, Miss Ellison. And you are? Emma Bennett. My pa said you might could help with division. I'll certainly try. Come in, find a seat. Other students trickled in over the next 15 minutes. Mara counted 17. 2 were apparently sick, ranging from a tiny 6-year-old boy who could barely see over his desk to a gangly 14-year-old who looked at her with barely concealed skepticism. Mara stood at the front of the room and took a breath. Good morning. I'm Miss Ellison, and I'm very pleased to meet all of you. I know starting with a new teacher can be difficult, so let's begin by getting to know each other. When I call your name, please stand and tell me one thing you'd like to learn this year. She went through the roster. Most of the answers were predictable. Better reading, help with writing, arithmetic. But when she got to a small boy in the back, he stood and said, I want to know why the sky's blue. Mara blinked. That's an excellent question. What's your name? Daniel Pratt, ma'am. Well, Daniel, I don't know if I can explain why the sky is blue, but I'll certainly try to find out. Anyone else have questions like that? Hands shot up. Why do birds fly south? How far away is the sun? Can you really sail all the way around the world? Do bears really sleep all winter? Mara felt something shift inside her. These children weren't just looking for basic education. They were hungry for knowledge, for understanding, for answers to questions the frontier couldn't provide. This was why she'd become a teacher. All right, she said, smiling for real now. Here's what we're going to do. Every Friday afternoon, we'll spend the last hour on questions. Anything you want to know, we'll try to find the answer together. But the rest of the week, we work on reading, writing, and arithmetic. Deal? A chorus of agreement. Good. Now, let's start with reading. Who can tell me what book you were working on with Mr. Hensley? The day passed in a blur. Mara quickly realized that her students' abilities varied wildly. Emma Bennett could read at a level above her age, while some of the younger children struggled with basic words. She'd have to split them into groups, create different lessons, find a way to challenge the advanced students while not leaving the others behind. It was exactly the kind of problem she loved solving. By 3 o'clock, when she dismissed the class, Mara was exhausted but exhilarated. This was going to work. She could make this work. Emma lingered after the others left. Miss Ellison? Pa said I should help with your stove. Oh, yes. Thank you. Emma pulled tools from a sack, wire brushes, rags, a small shovel, and went to work with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times. While she worked, she talked. Mr. Hensley wasn't much of a teacher. Mostly he just had us copy Bible verses. He didn't like questions. Well, I love questions, Mara said. I know, that's why you're better. Emma paused in her scrubbing. Some folks are saying you won't last, that you're too... They say you're not built for frontier life. Mara's stomach tightened. What do you think? Emma considered this seriously. I think anyone who walks through a blizzard to save Thomas Hayes is built for whatever they set their mind to. It was the second time someone had brought up that walk, and Mara realized it had become her credential. The thing that proved she wasn't just another soft city woman. She'd take it. Your stove's clean now, Emma said, packing up her tools. Should draw better. You need anything else? You let me know. Thank you, Emma. I will. The girl left, and Mara sat at her small table, looking at the lesson plan she needed to prepare for tomorrow. But her mind kept drifting to Caleb's cabin, to the quiet competence with which he'd moved through survival, to the way he'd looked at her like she was capable of anything. She wondered if he ever thought about those 3 days. She wondered if she'd see him again. The week unfolded with the rhythm of routine. Mara taught her students, prepared lessons in the evening, and slowly began to understand Iron Hollow's social structure. The town operated on a careful balance of cooperation and competition. Everyone needed each other to survive. The farmers needed the blacksmith needed the general store needed the farmers, but that didn't mean they all liked each other. And at the center of much of the social maneuvering was Lydia Crane. Mara attended her First Ladies Society meeting on Thursday and quickly realized it was less about charity and more about gossip dressed up as concern. Poor Mrs. Williams, Catherine Worth said, shaking her head. 4 children and a husband who drinks. Someone really should speak to him. Someone should speak to her, Eleanor added, the way she lets those children run wild. Now, Lydia interrupted, though her tone suggested she agreed. We're here to help, not judge. The hypocrisy was stunning. Mara mostly kept quiet, responding when spoken to, but offering little. She could feel Lydia watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. After the meeting, as Mara was leaving, Lydia caught her arm. Miss Ellison? A word? They stepped outside. The afternoon was cold but clear, and the main street was busy with people finishing their daily business. I wanted to ask, Lydia said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, about Caleb Boone. Mara's heart jumped. What about him? Just that you spent several days in his cabin, alone, with a married woman and a child, yes, but still, people talk. People always talk. True, but they talk more when there's something to talk about. Lydia's smile was sharp. Caleb Boone isn't the kind of man a respectable woman should associate with. He saved my life. Did he? Or did you simply impose on his hospitality during a storm? Lydia's eyes glittered. I'm just saying, for your own good, that Caleb has a reputation, and being seen with him could damage yours. What kind of reputation? The violent kind. The dangerous kind. Lydia leaned in, lowering her voice. He killed a man, Miss Ellison. In cold blood. That's why he lives out there alone. Because decent people don't want him around. Mara felt her chest tighten. I don't believe that. Believe what you like. But if you're smart, you'll stay away from him. Lydia straightened, her smile returning. I'm only trying to help. You're new here, and you don't understand how things work yet. But you will. She walked away, leaving Mara standing on the church steps, her mind racing. Caleb, a killer? It didn't fit with the man who'd brewed willow bark tea for a sick boy, who'd dug them out of the snow without complaint, who'd looked at her with something close to respect. But then she didn't really know him, did she? 3 days in a crisis didn't tell you who someone truly was, or maybe it told you exactly who they were. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Caleb's scars, the way he'd moved with controlled violence when checking the perimeter for wolves, the comment he'd made about being dangerous. She also thought about Lydia's warning, delivered with such false concern. By midnight, she'd made a decision. She didn't care what Lydia said, didn't care what the town thought. Caleb Boone had treated her with more respect in 3 days than most people had shown her in 24 years. If he was dangerous, it wasn't to her. Friday afternoon brought the promised question hour, and the students were ready. Why don't trees grow in winter? How do fish breathe underwater? Why does the moon change shape? Mara did her best to answer, admitting freely when she didn't know something. But we can look it up, she said, pulling out the handful of reference books the school owned. That's what learning is, finding answers. Daniel Pratt raised his hand. Miss Ellison, did you really save Thomas Hayes in the blizzard? The other students leaned forward, suddenly intensely interested. I walked to get help, Mara said carefully. Mr. Boone is the one who saved him. But you walked 2 miles in the snow, Emma said. That's what Ma told me. I did what anyone would have done. No, Emma said firmly. Most people would have stayed in the wagon and froze. You didn't. That makes you brave. Mara felt her throat tighten. These children saw her as brave, as capable, as someone worth admiring. It was a heady feeling. Well, she said, trying to keep her voice steady, sometimes being brave just means doing what needs to be done, even when you're scared. Were you scared? A small girl asked. Terrified. But you did it anyway? Yes. The girl nodded, satisfied with this answer. The week ended, and Mara felt like she'd cleared the first hurdle. Her students liked her. Some of the parents had even complimented her teaching. She was starting to build something here. Saturday morning, she was reorganizing her small living space when someone knocked on her door. She opened it to find Sarah Bennett holding a basket. Thought you might like some fresh bread, Sarah said, and I wanted to ask a favor. Of course, come in. Sarah set the basket on the table. The bread smelled incredible, and pulled out a ledger book. James and I keep accounts for the boarding house, but I swear this system makes no sense. Previous owner set it up, and it's a mess. Emma said you were good with numbers. Any chance you could look at it? Mara opened the ledger and winced. The columns were misaligned, entries were duplicated, and several pages had been crossed out and rewritten in a way that made tracking nearly impossible. This is pretty bad, she admitted. Can you fix it? I think so. It'll take some time. Take all the time you need. I'll pay you, of course. You don't have to. Miss Ellison, out here we pay for services rendered. You fix my books, I'll pay you. Or trade, if you prefer. Your choice. Mara thought about her meager savings. Payment would be appreciated. Done. And between you and me, if you're good at this, there's probably 6 businesses in town that need help. James is useless with numbers, and most of the men are the same. It was an opportunity Mara hadn't expected. Extra income, yes, but more than that, a way to prove her value beyond teaching. A way to become indispensable. I'll do my best, she said. I know you will. Sarah stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. Don't let Lydia Crane get under your skin. She's poison wrapped in silk, that one. She warned me about Caleb Boone. Of course she did. Lydia's had her eye on Caleb for 2 years now, thinks she can civilize him, bring him into town, make him respectable. But Caleb's not interested, which drives her mad. She sees you as competition. Mara almost laughed. Me? I barely know the man. Maybe. But he brought you into town himself. Caleb hasn't brought anyone into town in 5 years. People noticed. Sarah headed for the door. Just watch yourself and don't believe everything you hear. After Sarah left, Mara sat with the ledger and a cup of tea, her mind working through both the numbers and the implications. Lydia saw her as competition. The town was watching her. And Caleb Boone, whether he knew it or not, had put a target on her back simply by helping her. She should probably stay away from him, like Lydia suggested. She should focus on her teaching, her new life, building a place for herself in Iron Hollow. She should be smart. But Mara Ellison had spent her whole life being smart, being careful, being what other people wanted her to be. And where had it gotten her? Maybe it was time to stop being smart and start being honest. Sunday afternoon, she borrowed a horse from the stable. Mr. Johnson was surprised but didn't ask questions, and rode out toward Caleb's cabin. She half expected to get lost, but the trail was clearer than she remembered, and within an hour she saw the familiar shape of the cabin in the distance. Smoke rose from the chimney. He was home. Mara's heart hammered as she dismounted and tied the horse to a post. This was stupid, reckless, everything Lydia had warned her against. She knocked anyway. The door opened. Caleb stood there looking exactly as she remembered, big, scarred, surprised. Mara? Hello, Caleb. He glanced past her at the horse, then back to her face. Something wrong? Someone hurt? No, nothing like that. I just... She took a breath. I wanted to thank you, properly. You already thanked me. I know, but I also wanted to see you again. The words hung between them. Caleb's expression was unreadable. You shouldn't be here, he said finally. Why not? Because the town'll talk. Because Lydia Crane's probably already spreading rumors. Because I'm not. He stopped, jaw tightening. I'm not the kind of man you should know. That's the second time someone's told me that this week, Mara said. I didn't believe it then either. Then you're not listening. I'm listening fine. I just don't agree. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then, despite himself, his mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. You're stubborn. I prefer determined. Of course you do. He stepped back from the door. Come in then. If you're going to be foolish, might as well be warm while you do it. Mara stepped into the cabin, and the warmth enveloped her like a memory. Everything was exactly as she remembered. The fireplace, the simple furniture, the sense of order and purpose. How's the boy? Caleb asked, closing the door. Thomas? He's fine. His family sends their thanks, by the way. Don't need thanks. I know, but they wanted you to have it anyway. Mara pulled off her gloves. The town's treating me well enough. Better than I expected, honestly. That's good. And the teaching is wonderful, challenging, but wonderful. Good. They fell into silence. Not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted with things neither of them was saying. Finally, Caleb spoke. Why'd you really come out here, Mara? She met his eyes. Because you're the only person in Iron Hollow, maybe in my whole life, who's looked at me like I was capable instead of broken, and I wanted to know if that was real or just circumstance. It's real. Then I wanted you to know that I see you the same way. His expression shifted, surprise maybe, or something deeper. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you saved a boy you didn't know. I know you treated me with respect when you had no reason to. I know I killed a man. The words dropped like stones. Mara went still. Is that what Lydia told you? Caleb asked, his voice flat. She said you had a reputation, that you were dangerous. She's not wrong. He turned toward the fire, his back to her. During the war, I did things, afterwards too. Things I'm not proud of. And yeah, I killed a man. Several men, actually. Most in battle, one in a saloon fight that got out of hand. Self-defense? Does it matter? Yes. He glanced back at her. Why? Because there's a difference between a murderer and a survivor. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then, it was self-defense. He came at me with a knife, drunk and angry over a card game. I didn't want to fight, but he didn't give me a choice. Town marshal cleared me, but people remember what they want to remember. So you left. So I left. Mara stepped closer. I don't care about your past, Caleb. I care about who you are now. You should care. Past has a way of catching up. Maybe. But until it does, I'd like to get to know you better. If you'll let me. He turned to face her fully, and Mara saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not desire exactly, though there was that too. Something deeper. Recognition. The kind that happens when two people who've been told they don't belong find each other and realize they're not alone. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. Probably. I'm good at those. Mara, I'm not asking for promises, Caleb. I'm just asking for honesty. Can you give me that? He studied her face like he was trying to memorize it. Then, slowly, he nodded. Yeah, I can give you that. Good. Mara smiled. Then tell me what you've been doing for the past week. And just like that, the tension broke. Caleb actually smiled, a real smile, not just a quirk of his mouth, and started talking. About fixing his fence line, about the deer he'd seen near the creek, about the way the winter light hit the mountains differently than summer light. Mara listened and responded and felt something in her chest unfurl like a flower finding sun. This was right. Whatever the town thought, whatever Lydia said, whatever risks came with it, this was right. They talked until the sun started setting, until Mara realized with a start that she'd been there for hours. I should go, she said reluctantly, before it gets too dark. I'll ride back with you. You don't have to. Mara, he gave her a look. I'm riding back with you. She didn't argue. They rode slowly side by side, the horse's breath steaming in the cold air. When they reached the edge of town, Caleb stopped. This is far enough. Don't want to give the gossips more fuel. Too late for that, Mara said. But I appreciate the thought. You sure about this? About... He gestured vaguely between them. No. but I'm sure I want to try." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll try. But careful, yeah? This town? I know, I'll be careful." "Good." He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough and warm. "See you soon." "Soon," Mara agreed. She rode into Iron Hollow alone, her heart light despite the cold. She knew she was taking a risk, knew that being seen with Caleb would fuel speculation and judgment. But for the first time in her life, Mara Ellison didn't care what people thought. She'd found something worth fighting for, and she wasn't about to let it go without a fight. The whispers started Monday morning. Mara noticed them the moment she stepped outside to ring the school bell. Mrs. Carlton and Mrs. Pratt were standing near the general store, their heads bent together in conversation. When they saw her, they went silent, their eyes tracking her like hunters watching prey. Mara rang the bell and pretended not to notice. Inside, her students filed in with their usual noise and energy, blessedly oblivious to adult drama. But when Emma Bennett sat down, she leaned over and whispered, "Ma says you went to see Mr. Boone yesterday." So it had gotten around that fast. "I did," Mara said evenly. "I wanted to thank him properly for his help during the storm." Emma nodded like this made perfect sense. "Ma says people are being stupid about it, but that's just how folks are sometimes." Mara felt a rush of gratitude for Sarah Bennett's practical wisdom. The morning lessons went smoothly enough, but at lunch, when Mara stepped outside to get some air, she found Lydia Crane waiting for her. "Miss Ellison." Lydia's smile was razor sharp. "I heard you took a ride yesterday. How lovely." "It was," Mara said, refusing to take the bait. "All the way out to Caleb Boone's cabin, I understand. That's quite a journey for a simple thank you." It seemed appropriate. "Did it?" Lydia's eyes glittered with malice dressed as concern. "Because to most people, it seems rather inappropriate. A single woman riding alone to visit a single man at his isolated cabin. People are talking, Miss Ellison, about your judgment, your character." Mara felt anger spark in her chest. "Then people need better hobbies. This isn't a joke. You're a teacher. You're supposed to set an example for our children. How can you do that when you're engaging in behavior that's what exactly?" Mara cut her off, her voice sharp. "I visited a man who saved my life. I rode there in broad daylight, stayed for a few hours, and rode back before dark. If that's scandalous, then Iron Hollow's standards are impossibly high." Lydia's smile turned cold. "You're new here, so let me explain something. This town has rules, expectations, and women who break them don't last long. You may think you're special because you survived a blizzard, but that novelty will wear off, and when it does, all you'll have left is your reputation. I suggest you think carefully about whether Caleb Boone is worth destroying it." She walked away before Mara could respond, leaving her standing in the cold with fury and fear warring in her chest. That evening, Reverend Marsh stopped by her quarters. "Miss Ellison, might I have a word?" Mara's stomach sank, but she let him in. He stood awkwardly in her small room, his spectacles fogging slightly from the warmth of the stove. "I've heard some concerning talk," he began, not meeting her eyes, "about you and Mr. Boone." "I'm sure you have. I want you to understand that I don't put much stock in gossip, but as someone responsible for this school, I have to consider how things appear. Parents talk, and if they start to question your judgment—" "Reverend Marsh," Mara interrupted, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I visited a man who helped me during the worst crisis of my life. I did nothing improper. If the town wants to make something ugly out of simple gratitude, that says more about them than it does about me." He adjusted his spectacles nervously. "I understand that, I do, but perception matters. Perhaps it would be wise to maintain some distance for a while, until the talk dies down. And if it doesn't die down, then we'll deal with that when the time comes." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You're a good teacher, Miss Ellison. The children like you. The parents, most of them, appreciate the work you're doing. I'd hate to see that jeopardized over something that could be easily avoided." After he left, Mara sat at her table and stared at the ledger Sarah had given her. The numbers blurred as angry tears pricked her eyes. She'd done everything right, followed every rule. And still, people found reasons to judge her. Maybe Caleb had been right. Maybe she should have stayed away. But even as she thought it, she knew she couldn't. For once in her life, she'd found someone who saw her as whole instead of broken. She wasn't giving that up because small-minded people couldn't handle it. The week dragged. Mara taught her classes, worked on Sarah's ledger in the evenings, and tried to ignore the stares and whispers that followed her through town. Some people were kind. Sarah stopped by with food. Emma brought her mother's mending that needed help. Mr. Johnson at the stable always had a friendly word, but others had turned cold. Mrs. Carlton no longer smiled when they passed on the street. The Pratts pulled their youngest son from school, claiming he was needed at home, and Lydia made sure to be visible everywhere Mara went, watching with that calculating smile. By Thursday, Mara was exhausted from the weight of judgment. That afternoon, she was walking back from the general store when she heard shouting from the direction of the river. She wasn't the only one who heard it. Several townspeople were already running toward the sound, and Mara followed, her heart pounding. At the riverbank, a crowd had gathered. Through the press of bodies, Mara saw the problem. A young boy, couldn't be more than 7 or 8, was trapped on a rock in the middle of the river. The water was high from snowmelt, rushing fast and cold, and the boy was crying, his small body shaking. "That's the Murphy boy," someone said. "Little Jack, he was playing on the rocks and slipped." "Someone's got to get him," a woman cried. "Too dangerous," a man replied. "Current's too strong. We need rope, a plan." "He'll freeze before we can organize anything," another voice argued. Mara pushed through the crowd to the water's edge. The boy was maybe 15 feet from shore, but those 15 feet looked like miles. The water churned white around the rocks, and ice chunks floated past like knives. "Can you swim?" she called to the boy. He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart. Just hold on, okay? We're going to get you." She looked around at the assembled men. "Can any of you swim?" "Not in that," one said. "That water's near freezing. You'd last maybe 2 minutes before your muscles locked up." "Then we don't have time to wait." Before anyone could stop her, Mara kicked off her shoes and started wading into the river. The cold hit like a sledgehammer. Her breath left her lungs in a gasp, and for a moment she couldn't move. But the boy was crying harder now, and that sound cut through the shock. "Miss Ellison, no!" someone shouted from shore. Mara ignored them. The water was up to her thighs now, then her waist, and the current was stronger than she'd expected. It pulled at her skirts, trying to drag her downstream. One step, another. The rocks were slippery under her feet. "I'm coming, Jack," she called, though her teeth were already chattering. "Just hold on." 3 more steps and she was close enough to reach him. She grabbed onto the rock he was clinging to, her fingers already numb. "Okay," she said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the cold that was seeping into her bones. "I'm going to carry you. You're going to hold on tight to my neck. Can you do that?" Jack nodded, still crying. "Good boy. On 3. 1, 2. He launched himself at her, nearly knocking her off balance. Mara caught him and held tight, feeling his small body shaking against hers. "I've got you," she said. "I've got you." The trip back was worse than the trip out. Jack's weight threw off her balance, and the current kept trying to sweep her feet out from under her. Twice she nearly fell. But each time she found her footing and pushed forward. The crowd on shore was shouting encouragement, their voices blending into a wall of sound. Mara focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on keeping Jack's head above water, on not thinking about how cold she was, or how her legs were starting to shake. 5 feet from shore, strong hands reached out and grabbed her. Mr. Johnson from the stable and 2 other men pulled her and Jack onto solid ground. Someone wrapped a blanket around her immediately. Someone else took Jack, who was crying but alive. Mara collapsed onto the frozen mud, her whole body shaking so violently she couldn't speak. "Get her to the doctor," Mr. Johnson said. "And the boy too, now." The next hour passed in a blur. Mara was half carried to Dr. Brennan's office, stripped of her wet clothes, wrapped in more blankets, and given something hot to drink that burned going down. The doctor, a gruff man in his 50s, checked her over with professional efficiency. "You're damn lucky," he said. "Another minute in that water and you'd be dead. As it is, you'll be fine, sore and cold for a few days, but fine." "The boy? He'll be fine too, thanks to you." Mara closed her eyes, relief washing over her. When she finally emerged from the doctor's office, wrapped in borrowed clothes and blankets, she found half the town waiting outside. Mrs. Murphy, Jack's mother, rushed forward and grabbed Mara's hands. "Thank you. Thank you. I can't. You saved my boy. He's all right, Mara managed. He's perfect. Scared, but perfect. Because of you. Mrs. Murphy's eyes were streaming tears. If there's anything I can do, anything you need, I'm just glad he's safe, Mara said. Other people pressed forward then, offering thanks, praise, support. Even Mrs. Carlton was there, looking abashed. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, Sarah Bennett said, appearing at Mara's elbow. Also the stupidest, but mostly brave. Mara laughed, and it came out shaky. I didn't really think about it. That's what makes it brave. The crowd eventually dispersed, and Sarah walked Mara back to her quarters. Inside, Mara finally let herself collapse onto her bed. The talk's going to change now, Sarah said, stoking the stove. You just proved you're one of us, that you'll risk yourself for Iron Hollow's children. That matters more than any gossip about Caleb Boone. Mara hoped she was right. By the next morning, the whole town knew the story. When Mara arrived at the school, she found gifts on her doorstep, fresh bread, preserves, even a new pair of gloves to replace the ones she'd lost in the river. Her students greeted her like a hero. You saved Jack Murphy, Daniel Pratt announced. I heard you swam through ice, another child added. It wasn't quite that dramatic, Mara said, but she couldn't help smiling. Even the Pratts brought their son back to school, Mrs. Pratt murmuring an apology about being too hasty. Mara accepted it gracefully, though she noticed Lydia Crane was conspicuously absent from the well-wishers. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, Caleb. Mara was helping Emma with long division when she looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, his hat in his hands. Mr. Boone, she said, her heart jumping. Can I help you? Heard about what you did, he said quietly. Wanted to make sure you were all right. The students had all turned to stare. Mara felt their curious eyes like physical touches. I'm fine. Thank you for asking. He nodded, but his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. That was a damn fool thing to do. So I've been told. Could have died. But I didn't. His mouth quirked in almost smile. No, you didn't. He glanced at the watching children, then back to her. I'll let you get back to teaching. He turned to leave, but Mara called after him. Caleb? He stopped. Thank you for checking on me. Any time. After he left, Emma leaned over. You like him. It wasn't a question. Mara felt her cheeks heat. Mr. Boone and I are friends. Ma says he's sweet on you too, says she can tell by the way he looks at you. Your mother should mind her own business, Mara said, but without heat. Emma grinned. That's what Pa says too. That evening, as Mara was preparing dinner, someone knocked on her door. She opened it to find Lydia Crane standing there, and the look on her face made Mara's stomach tighten. Miss Ellison, may I come in? Mara wanted to refuse, but courtesy won out. Of course, Lydia entered, looking around the small room with barely concealed disdain. Cozy. It suits me, I'm sure. Lydia turned to face her, all pretense of friendliness gone. I saw Caleb Boone at the school today. He stopped by to check on me after the river incident. How touching. And you're still seeing him, I assume. That's not really your business. It becomes my business when it affects this town. Lydia's voice went hard. You may have won people over with your little heroic moment, but don't think that changes anything between you and Caleb. He's still dangerous, still an outcast, and being associated with him will still destroy your reputation eventually. Why do you care so much? Mara asked, her patience finally snapping. What is it about Caleb that has you this obsessed? Lydia's mask slipped for just a moment, and Mara saw raw anger beneath. Because he was supposed to be mine. I worked for 2 years to bring him back into society, to make him see that he could have a respectable life. And then you show up, some fat schoolteacher from the city who can barely walk a mile, and suddenly he's riding into town, checking on you, looking at you like you're something special. The venom in her voice was startling. Mara took a step back. You're not even pretty, Lydia continued, her composure cracking further. You're not elegant or refined or anything a man like Caleb should want, but somehow you've gotten your hooks into him, and I won't stand for it. I haven't done anything to you, Mara said quietly. You exist. That's enough. Lydia moved toward the door, then paused. Stay away from him, Miss Ellison, or I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of woman you really are." She left, slamming the door behind her. Mara stood in the silence, her heart racing. Lydia wasn't just jealous, she was unhinged, and that made her dangerous. But what could Mara do? She couldn't control what Lydia said or did. All she could control was herself. And she wasn't going to let threats dictate her choices. Sunday after church, Mara borrowed the horse again and rode out to Caleb's cabin. This time she didn't care who saw her leave or what they said about it. Caleb was chopping wood when she arrived. He stopped mid-swing when he saw her, the axe lowering. "Twice in 2 weeks," he said. "People really are going to talk now." "Let them." Mara dismounted, tying the horse. "I needed to see you." Something in her voice made him set down the axe and give her his full attention. "What happened?" She told him about Lydia's visit, about the threats, about the barely controlled rage she'd witnessed. Caleb's expression grew darker with each word. "She's been after me for years," he said when she finished. "Thought if she was patient enough, persistent enough, I'd eventually give in. When I didn't, she got mean about it." "She's more than mean, Caleb. She's obsessed." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I've tried being clear, tried being kind, tried being blunt. Nothing works. She just sees it as a challenge. And now she sees me as the obstacle." "Yeah." He looked at her, his expression troubled. "Maybe it would be better if you stayed away. For your safety." "No." "Mara, no," she repeated, more firmly. "I'm not letting Lydia Crane dictate my life. I'm not letting fear make my choices. I spent 24 years doing that, and I'm done." Caleb studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him despite the cold air. "You're sure about this? About us?" "As sure as I've been about anything." He reached out, cupping her face with one calloused hand. His touch was gentle despite the roughness of his skin. "Then we'll deal with whatever comes," he said quietly. "Together." Mara leaned into his touch, feeling something settle in her chest. This was right. Whatever storms came, whatever judgment followed, this was right. They spent the afternoon together, talking about everything and nothing. Caleb told her about his life before the war, about the farm his family had owned, about the brother he'd lost to fever and the ones he'd lost to battle. Mara told him about Philadelphia, about the constant weight of other people's opinions, about the desperate loneliness of being seen but never truly known. "I was invisible," she said. "People looked at me and saw only my body, my size, my failure to meet their expectations. They never saw me." "I see you," Caleb said. And when Mara met his eyes, she knew he meant it. She rode back to Iron Hollow as the sun was setting, her heart lighter than it had been in days. But when she reached the edge of town, she found a crowd gathered in the street. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the tension of their bodies, hear it in their raised voices. She urged the horse forward, and the crowd parted to let her through. In the center of the street stood a man Mara had never seen before. He was tall and lean, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty in his eyes. He wore a gun on his hip and stood with the casual arrogance of someone used to getting his way. And he was talking to Reverend Marsh. "Just asking if Caleb Boone still lives in these parts," the stranger was saying. "Old friend of mine, wanted to look him up." "Mr. Boone keeps to himself," Reverend Marsh said carefully. "Doesn't come to town much." "That sounds like Caleb." The stranger's smile was all teeth. "Always did prefer solitude. But I've got business with him, so if someone could point me in the right direction." His eyes landed on Mara, and his smile widened. "Well now, you must be the school teacher I've been hearing about, the one who's been keeping Caleb company." Mara's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. Small town, big gossip. Word is you and Caleb have been spending a lot of time together." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Name's Victor Hale. I'm an old friend of Caleb's. We used to ride together, back in the day." The way he said ride together made it clear he didn't mean casual horseback trips. "Caleb never mentioned you," Mara said. "I'm sure he didn't. Caleb's not one for talking about the past. But that's all right. I'm here now and we'll have plenty of time to catch up." Victor's eyes swept the crowd. "Any of you good folks want to tell me where to find him? Or do I have to ask around until someone gets helpful?" No one spoke. But Mara saw Mrs. Carlton glance toward the north road, the road that led to Caleb's cabin, and she saw Victor notice it too. "Much obliged," he said, tipping his hat again. "I'll be on my way then." He mounted a horse that looked too fine for a common drifter and rode north, leaving the crowd murmuring nervously behind him. Mara's hands were shaking. She knew, somehow she just knew, that Victor Hale was trouble, the kind of trouble that Caleb had been running from. Sarah appeared at her elbow. "You need to warn him." "I know. Go now, before—" But Mara was already turning the horse, already pushing toward the north road. She didn't care about the crowd watching, didn't care about propriety or reputation or anything except getting to Caleb before Victor did. She pushed the horse hard, harder than was wise on the darkening trail, but fear drove her forward. "Please let me be in time," she thought. "Please." She reached the cabin just as full dark fell. Victor's horse was tied outside, and through the window she could see two silhouettes, Caleb and Victor, facing each other in the firelight. Mara tied her horse and moved quietly to the door. It was cracked open, and voices drifted out. "Can't just show up here, Victor. We're done. Have been for years." "We're done when I say we're done." Victor's voice was hard. "You owe me, Caleb. You owe me 5 years." "I don't owe you anything. I saved your life twice. We're even." "That's not how this works. You and me, we're partners. Always have been. Always will be. And I've got a job that needs your particular skills. I'm out of that life." "Are you?" Victor laughed. "Living out here alone, hiding from the world, that's not being out. That's being a coward." Mara heard movement, rapid and violent. When she dared peek through the window, she saw Caleb had Victor pressed against the wall, one hand on his throat. "Get out," Caleb said, his voice low and dangerous. "Get out and don't come back." Victor wheezed but managed a smile. "Can't do that. See, I told some people where you were. People who remember the Cumberland job. People who want their share of what we took. That money's long gone." "I know, but they don't believe me. So either you come with me and help explain that to them, or they'll come here. And when they do, they won't be gentle. Especially not with that pretty school teacher you've been courting." Caleb's hand tightened. "You leave her out of this. Then come with me. Help me settle this debt. Do that, and I'll make sure no one ever bothers you or your woman again." "She's not my woman." "Could have fooled me." Victor's smile turned nasty. "Whole town's talking about it. How she rides out here, spends hours with you, looks at you like you hung the moon. You really think keeping your distance is going to protect her if my associates come calling?" Caleb let Victor go, stepping back. His shoulders were tight with tension. "How long?" "A month, maybe 2. Just one last job and then we're square. I give you my word." "Your word doesn't mean much. It's all I've got." Victor straightened his collar. "Think about it. I'll be in town for a few days. You know where to find me." He headed for the door. Mara barely had time to duck into the shadows before he emerged, mounted his horse, and rode off into the night. She waited until he was gone, then stepped into the doorway. Caleb was standing by the fire, his back to her, his whole body radiating tension. "How much did you hear?" he asked without turning. "Enough." He turned then, and the look on his face broke her heart. Guilt, shame, fear, all of it written clearly in the lines around his eyes. "This is what I tried to tell you," he said. "This is who I was, who I might still be." Mara stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "What was the Cumberland job?" "Train robbery, 5 years ago. Victor and I and 3 others hit a Union Pacific freight carrying payroll. We got away with $30,000. She felt her stomach drop. "That's a lot of money." "Yeah, we split it 5 ways, agreed to lay low for a few years. But the law came harder than we expected. 2 of the others got caught and hanged. The third one—" He stopped, his jaw working. "The third one died in a shootout with marshals. It was just me and Victor left." "And you ran." "I ran. Changed my name, moved out here, tried to start over. Thought maybe I could bury that life. But the past doesn't stay buried." Mara moved closer to him. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. If I don't go with Victor, he'll bring trouble here, to this town, to you. But if I do go, I might not come back." "Then don't go." "Mara—" "Don't go," she repeated more firmly. "We'll figure this out. Together. The town, the sheriff, someone. There has to be another way." "There isn't. This is the kind of debt you can't negotiate." "Then we fight." He looked at her like she'd lost her mind. You don't fight men like this. You run or you die. I'm not running, and neither are you. Mara grabbed his hands, forcing him to look at her. You saved my life, Caleb. Let me help save yours. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust that you're not alone in this. Caleb's eyes searched hers, and she saw the moment he broke, saw him realize that he'd been alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it meant to have someone stand with him. All right, he said quietly. We'll try it your way. But if this goes bad, it won't. But if it does, you run. You promise me that. Whatever happens, you run. Mara wanted to argue, but she saw the desperate fear in his eyes and realized this was non-negotiable. I promise, she said. He pulled her into his arms then, holding her like she was something precious and fragile. Mara buried her face in his chest and felt his heart hammering against her cheek. They stood like that for a long time, two broken people clinging to each other in the darkness, hoping that together they might be strong enough to face what was coming. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the promise of another storm. But this time the storm wasn't snow and ice. This time it was flesh and blood and violence, and it was headed straight for Iron Hollow. Mara rode back to Iron Hollow alone, her mind racing faster than the horse's hooves. Caleb had wanted to escort her, but she'd refused. Someone needed to stay at the cabin in case Victor returned, and besides, she needed time to think. By the time she reached town, she had the beginnings of a plan. It was risky, probably stupid, but it was the only thing she could come up with that didn't end with Caleb running or dying. She went straight to Sarah Bennett's boarding house and pounded on the door. Sarah answered in her nightgown, a lamp in one hand and a rolling pin in the other. Mara, what in the... I need your help, Mara said, and I need you to trust me without asking too many questions. Sarah's eyes sharpened. She'd survived on the frontier long enough to recognize genuine urgency. Come in. Inside, Mara laid it out as quickly as she could. Victor Hale. The train robbery. The threat hanging over Caleb and, by extension, the whole town. Sweet mercy, Sarah breathed when Mara finished. That's a mess. I know, but I have an idea. Mara leaned forward. Victor's staying in town, right? At the saloon, probably? Most likely. Then he has belongings. A saddlebag. Maybe documents. Money. Something that might tell us who these associates are and what they really want. Sarah's eyebrows rose. You want to search his things? Yes. That's breaking and entering. Theft, even. I know. If you get caught, I won't. Mara met Sarah's eyes steadily. But I need someone watching my back. Someone who can warn me if he comes back unexpectedly. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she set down the rolling pin and grabbed her coat. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the craziest, she said. Probably both. Let's go. The saloon was still rowdy. It was Saturday night, and men were drinking away their wages. Mara and Sarah slipped around to the back stairs that led to the rooms above. The door was unlocked, and they crept up the narrow staircase, their hearts pounding. Which room? Mara whispered. Third on the left. I saw him go in earlier. They reached the door. Mara pressed her ear against it, listening. Nothing. She tried the handle, locked. Damn, let me. Sarah pulled a hairpin from her hair and worked it into the lock with practiced ease. At Mara's surprised look, she shrugged. Had a wild youth. Don't ask. The lock clicked. They slipped inside. Victor's room was sparse but not empty. A bedroll, a saddlebag hanging on a chair, clothes draped over a trunk. Mara went straight for the saddlebag while Sarah kept watch at the door. Inside the bag, she found the usual traveler's items, a spare shirt, ammunition, dried meat. But underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather folder. Mara's hands shook as she opened it. Papers, legal documents. And there, a land deed. Multiple land deeds, actually, for properties in Iron Hollow and the surrounding valley. She scanned them quickly, her mind working. These weren't Victor's deeds. The names were wrong, people she didn't recognize. And the dates were strange, all recent, all within the last 3 months. What is it? Sarah whispered. Land deeds, but they're... Mara's eyes widened as understanding hit. They're forgeries. They have to be. Victor's been buying up claims under false names. Why would he do that? Because if you control enough land in a valley, you control the water rights, the grazing, everything. Mara's mind raced. This isn't about the train robbery at all. That's just the excuse he's using to pressure Caleb. This is about taking over Iron Hollow. But why does he need Caleb? Because Caleb's cabin sits on the key piece of land, the one with the spring that feeds the whole valley. Mara remembered the crystal clear water Caleb had drawn from his well. Without that water source, the rest of the land is worthless in summer. Sarah's face went pale. If Victor controls the water, he controls everything. The farms, the ranches, the town itself. He could charge whatever he wanted, drive out anyone who wouldn't pay. That's... Footsteps on the stairs. Both women froze. Sarah doused the lamp they'd lit, plunging the room into darkness. "Hide," Mara hissed, shoving the papers back into the saddlebag. They dove under the bed just as the door opened. Through the gap between the mattress and the floor, Mara could see Boots, Victor's Boots, walking into the room. He was humming. Actually humming, like he didn't have a care in the world. Another pair of boots appeared. These were finer, more expensive. "You're sure Boone will cooperate?" a cultured voice asked. "He will once I explain his options," Victor said. "Caleb's got a soft spot for that schoolteacher. Threaten her, he'll fold. And if he doesn't, then we do this the hard way. Take the land by force, run him off, or bury him. Either works." The expensive boots moved closer to the bed. Mara held her breath, certain they were about to be discovered. "What about the town?" the cultured voice asked. "They won't just roll over." "Towns always roll over when you control their water. Give it a month. They'll be begging to sell. We'll buy everything for pennies, then bring in our own people. Clean sweep. You'd better be right about this. We've invested considerable capital in those forged deeds. Trust me, by spring we'll own this whole valley. And Caleb Boone?" Victor laughed. "He'll be 6 feet under, or running so far he'll never stop." The men talked for a few more minutes about logistics, about which properties to target first, about how much profit they stood to make. Mara memorized every word, her anger building with each sentence. Finally, the expensive boots left. Victor stayed, moving around the room, and Mara's legs were cramping from staying still. Then, mercifully, Victor grabbed something from his saddlebag, not the folder, thankfully, and left, locking the door behind him. Mara and Sarah waited a full minute before crawling out from under the bed. "We have to tell someone," Sarah said. The sheriff's in the next county and won't be back for a week. By then it'll be too late." Mara grabbed the folder again, this time pulling out several of the most damning documents. "I'm taking these. If we can prove the deeds are forged, that's theft. It's evidence. Mara, I'm not letting Victor destroy this town. Or Caleb." Mara tucked the papers inside her coat. "Come on, we need to go before he comes back." They slipped out the way they'd come, their hearts pounding. Only when they were safely back at Sarah's boarding house did they allow themselves to breathe. "What now?" Sarah asked. "Now I need to see these documents in daylight, figure out how to prove they're fake." Mara's mind was already working. "The signatures are probably forged. If I can compare them to the real property records, those are at the county office, 20 miles from here. Then I'll ride there tomorrow. That's a full day's journey there and back. You'll miss school. Emma can cover for me. She's smart enough." Mara met Sarah's eyes. "This is bigger than one day of school. This is about saving everything." Sarah nodded slowly. "I'll help however I can. But Mara, if Victor finds out you took those papers, he won't. Not until it's too late." Mara hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. Sunday morning, Mara rode out before dawn. The county office was in Sweetwater, a larger town that served as the administrative center for the territory. She pushed the horse hard, arriving just after the office opened. The clerk was a pinch-faced man who looked annoyed to have his Sunday disturbed. "I need to see the property records for Iron Hollow Valley," Mara said. "Why?" "I'm researching land ownership for a school project." He looked skeptical, but pulled out the heavy ledger books. Mara spread Victor's forged deeds next to the official records and compared them line by line. There, and there, and there. The signatures didn't match. The dates were impossible. One deed claimed to be filed 3 months ago, but the official record showed that property had been sold to someone else 6 months ago. Another deed listed a grantor who'd been dead for 2 years. Victor had been sloppy. Or arrogant. Probably both. Mara carefully copied the discrepancies. noting page numbers and filing dates. The clerk watched her with increasing suspicion. "You writing a book?" he asked. "Something like that." Mara finished her notes and stood. "Thank you for your help." She was back on the horse and riding hard before he could ask more questions. She reached Iron Hollow just after dark, exhausted and sore but triumphant. She had proof. Real documented proof that Victor's land claims were fraudulent. Now she just had to figure out what to do with it. Monday morning came too soon. Mara taught her classes on autopilot, her mind elsewhere. The students noticed. Emma kept giving her concerned looks, but no one said anything. At lunch, Reverend Marsh stopped by. "Miss Ellison, we need to talk about Caleb Boone." Mara's stomach tightened. "What about him?" "There's been talk about his past, about the man who came looking for him, Victor Hale." Marsh looked uncomfortable. "People are worried. They're saying Caleb brought trouble to Iron Hollow." "Caleb didn't bring anything. Victor came on his own." "Perhaps, but the result is the same. We have a dangerous man in town, asking questions, making people nervous. And Caleb is at the center of it. Caleb is the victim here, not the villain. I'm not making judgments about his character. I'm telling you what people are saying, and they're saying—" Marsh paused, choosing his words carefully. "That perhaps it would be better if Caleb left, before this situation escalates." Mara felt fury rise in her chest. "You want him to run? I want to protect this town." "Then help me protect it properly." Mara pulled out the copied documents. "Victor Hale isn't here because of some old robbery. He's here to steal this valley. Look at these." She showed him the evidence, the forged deeds, the discrepancies, the whole scheme. Marsh's eyes widened as he read. This is fraud, criminal fraud. Yes, and if we let Victor drive Caleb out, there's nothing stopping him from executing this plan. He'll own the water rights within months. The whole valley will be at his mercy." Marsh sat down heavily. "What do you propose we do?" "We expose him, publicly, before he can act. That's dangerous. If he's willing to commit fraud on this scale, he won't hesitate to use violence to protect it." "I know, but we don't have a choice." Mara leaned forward. "We need to call a town meeting, tonight. Get everyone together and show them what Victor's planning. He'll be there too." "Good. Let him try to explain this in front of the whole town." Marsh looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "You want to confront him directly, in public? It's the only way to protect everyone at once. If we do this quietly, he can pick us off one by one. But if the whole town knows, if everyone sees the proof, he loses his power. Or he gets violent. Maybe. But I'm betting he's too smart for that. Violence would bring the law down on him, and he knows it. His whole scheme depends on staying just legal enough to avoid federal marshals." Mara gathered her papers. "Help me or don't, but I'm doing this either way." Marsh was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, squaring his shoulders. "I'll spread the word. 7 o'clock at the church." By evening, the entire town had gathered. The church was packed, standing room only, and the air was thick with nervous energy. Mara stood at the front, her documents clutched in shaking hands. Victor sat in the back, his expression amused. Next to him sat the man with the expensive boots, older, distinguished-looking, watching everything with cold calculation. Lydia Crane sat near the front, her eyes moving between Mara and Victor with poorly concealed excitement. She was hoping for a show, Mara realized, hoping to see Mara humiliated. Caleb stood near the door, his face carefully neutral. But when Mara caught his eye, she saw the worry there. Reverend Marsh called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. Miss Ellison has brought some concerning information to my attention. Information that affects everyone in this valley." He nodded to Mara. "Miss Ellison?" Mara stepped forward. Her legs were shaking, but she forced her voice to stay steady. 3 days ago, a man named Victor Hale arrived in Iron Hollow. He claimed to be looking for an old friend, Caleb Boone, but that was a lie. Victor Hale is here to steal this valley. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Victor's smile widened. "That's quite an accusation," he called out. "You have any proof?" "Yes." Mara held up the documents. "I have copies of forged land deeds, deeds that claim ownership of properties throughout this valley, deeds that Victor and his associates plan to use to control our water rights and force us all out." The murmurs grew louder. People started turning to look at Victor. May I see these so-called forgeries? The distinguished man asked, standing. I'm Richard Blackwell, by the way, Mr. Hale's legal counsel. Of course. Mara handed the papers to Reverend Marsh, who passed them back. Blackwell studied them for a moment, his expression unchanged. Then he looked up with a smile that was pure venom wrapped in silk. These are interesting, but I'm afraid they prove nothing. Land transactions are complex, signatures can vary, dates can be recorded differently by different offices. He handed the papers back. Without access to the original deeds, which I assume you don't have since that would require theft, this is all speculation. Mara's heart sank. He was right. Without the actual forged deeds, she only had copies of the county records showing the discrepancies. It wasn't enough. However, Blackwell continued, his smile growing, I appreciate your concern for the community. It shows real civic spirit, misguided, but spirited. Lydia laughed, a high, cruel sound. Others joined her, and Mara felt humiliation burn through her. She'd miscalculated, badly. Then Caleb stepped forward. She's telling the truth. Every head turned. Caleb moved through the crowd, and people parted for him like water around a stone. Victor came to my cabin last week, told me about his plan. Control the land, control the water, squeeze everyone until they sell. He wanted me to join him. When I refused, he threatened Miss Ellison. Victor's smile finally slipped. That's a lie. Is it? Caleb's voice was hard. You told me yourself. Said you'd bring your associates down on this town if I didn't cooperate. Said you'd make sure Mara was caught in the crossfire. Prove it. I don't have to. You just did. Caleb gestured at Blackwell. Why bring a lawyer to a friendly visit? Why have forged deeds at all if your business is legitimate? Blackwell's expression hardened. Mr. Boone, I understand you have a colorful past. Train robbery, I believe. Perhaps you're projecting your own criminal tendencies onto legitimate businessmen. The crowd gasped. Several people looked at Caleb with new suspicion. Mara felt panic rising. This was falling apart. Blackwell was too smooth, too prepared. He was turning the town against Caleb, making him the villain. She had to do something. You're right, she said loudly. I don't have the original deeds, but I know where they are. Victor went very still. They're in Victor's saddlebag, at the saloon, third room on the left. Mara met his eyes. Go ahead. Show everyone I'm wrong. Show them your saddlebag and prove those deeds don't exist. The silence was absolute. Victor's jaw worked. My personal belongings are none of this town's business. Then you won't mind showing them, Mara said sweetly. Unless you have something to hide. This is absurd. I don't have to prove anything to what... Actually, a new voice interrupted. You do. Sheriff Porter stood in the doorway. A big man with gray hair and a badge that caught the lamplight. He must have just arrived in town. Sheriff, Blackwell said smoothly, this is a private matter. Fraud's not a private matter. It's a crime. Porter moved into the room. And if Miss Ellison's willing to swear she saw forged deeds in Mr. Hale's possession, that gives me cause to search his belongings. I swear it, Mara said immediately. Based on what? Blackwell demanded. She has no authority to search private property. Anything she claims to have seen would be inadmissible. In a trial, maybe? But this ain't a trial. This is me deciding whether to investigate. Porter looked at Victor. What's it gonna be? You let me look peacefully, or do I get a warrant and tear that room apart? Victor's face had gone red. You can't. I can, and I will. Porter's hand rested casually on his gun. Your choice. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Victor stood, his chair scraping loudly. Fine, let's get this over with. The whole town followed them to the saloon. A bizarre parade through the dark streets. Mara walked next to Caleb, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. That was incredibly stupid, Caleb murmured. I know. Also incredibly brave. I know that too. They reached the saloon. Victor unlocked his door with jerky movements, his composure finally cracking. Sheriff Porter went in first, followed by Reverend Marsh and several other town leaders. Mara waited outside with the crowd, barely breathing. Minutes passed. Then Porter emerged, holding the leather folder. Found these tucked in his saddlebag, he announced. 18 land deeds, all for properties in Iron Hollow Valley. And unless I miss my guess, he opened one, squinting at it in the lamplight. These signatures don't match the ones in the county records. The crowd erupted, people shouting, demanding answers, pressing closer. Victor tried to run. He didn't make it 3 steps before Caleb caught him, one big hand grabbing the back of his collar and hauling him backwards. Victor swung wildly, but Caleb blocked the punch and put him on the ground with brutal efficiency. "Stay down," Caleb said quietly. Victor stayed down. Sheriff Porter produced handcuffs. "Victor Hale, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft. You have the right to—" "This isn't over," Victor spat, struggling against the cuffs. "You think I'm the only one? You think stopping me stops anything? There are bigger players than me, powerful people who want this land, and they'll come for you, for all of you." "Let them come," Mara said, stepping forward. "We'll be ready." Victor laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You? You're nothing, a fat schoolteacher playing detective. You think you've won? You've just made yourself a target." Caleb moved toward him, but Mara held up a hand. "I'd rather be a target than a coward," she said calmly. "At least I can sleep at night." Porter hauled Victor to his feet. "Blackwell, you coming quietly, or do I need cuffs for you too?" Blackwell had been edging toward his horse. He froze, calculated his odds, then raised his hands in surrender. "I'm simply legal counsel. I had no knowledge of any criminal activity." "Sure you didn't. We'll let a judge figure that out." Porter looked at the crowd. "Anyone else involved in this scheme better speak up now. Things will go easier if you cooperate." No one spoke. "Right then. I'll be taking these 2 to Sweetwater for processing. Miss Ellison," he nodded at Mara. "I'll need you to give a full statement. Tomorrow work?" "Yes, sir." "Good. And Mr. Boone?" Porter looked at Caleb. "Appreciate you not killing this fool. Makes my paperwork easier." Caleb nodded, his expression unreadable. Porter loaded Victor and Blackwell into a wagon and drove off into the night, leaving the town standing in stunned silence. Then someone started clapping. It was Emma Bennett. Then Sarah joined her. Then Mr. Johnson. Within moments, the whole crowd was applauding, and people were pressing forward to thank Mara, to shake her hand, to tell her she'd saved them all. Even Mrs. Carlton was there, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry for doubting you, for listening to gossip. You're the bravest woman I've ever met." "I'm not brave," Mara said. "I'm just tired of letting bad people win." The crowd eventually dispersed, people heading home with excited chatter about what they'd witnessed. Mara found herself standing alone with Caleb in the empty street. "You could have gotten yourself killed," he said. "But I didn't." Victor was right about one thing. There might be others. People who want this land. People who won't be stopped by one arrest. Then we'll stop them too. Mara moved closer. Together. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. "Together," he agreed. He took her hand and they walked through Iron Hollow side by side. 2 people who'd been told they didn't belong, finally finding their place in the world. Above them, stars glittered like promises. And for the first time in her life, Mara Ellison believed that maybe, just maybe, those promises might actually come true. But in the shadows near the general store, Lydia Crane watched them with eyes full of poison. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The week following Victor's arrest should have been peaceful, should have been the beginning of everything Mara had hoped for when she'd first arrived in Iron Hollow. Acceptance, community, a fresh start. Instead, it was the calm before something worse. Mara felt it in the way Lydia watched her during the Ladies' Society meeting on Thursday. Not with the usual petty jealousy, but with something colder, more calculated. "You must be so proud," Lydia said, her voice dripping honey over razors. "Taking down dangerous criminals. Very heroic." "I just did what needed doing," Mara replied carefully. "Of course, though I wonder—" Lydia paused, arranging cookies on a plate with meticulous precision. "What will happen when Victor's associates arrive? Because they will arrive, won't they? Men like that don't just give up because one of their own got arrested." Catherine and Eleanor exchanged nervous glances. Several other women shifted uncomfortably. "If they come, we'll handle it," Mara said, though her stomach tightened. "We?" Lydia's smile was sharp. "Or do you mean Caleb? I'm sure he'll protect you, right up until the moment it becomes inconvenient." "That's enough," Sarah Bennett said sharply. "Mara saved this town. Show some respect." Lydia's eyes flashed. "I'm simply being realistic. Miss Ellison has made powerful enemies, And when those enemies come calling, I'd hate to see innocent people caught in the crossfire. The meeting ended shortly after, the usual gossip replaced by tense silence. As Mara was leaving, Sarah pulled her aside. She's planning something. I can feel it. I know, but what? Nothing good. Sarah's expression was grim. Watch yourself. Lydia's dangerous when she's been humiliated. Mara walked back to the schoolhouse, her mind churning. Lydia was right about one thing. Victor's warning hadn't been empty bluster. There were others, and they were coming. She just didn't know when. The answer came Saturday morning. Mara was grading papers when she heard horses. Too many horses. She looked out the window and felt her blood run cold. 6 men rode into town, heavily armed, their faces hard. They weren't drifters or travelers. These were men who'd come with purpose. The lead rider was massive, even bigger than Caleb, with a scar that bisected his face from forehead to chin. He dismounted in front of the general store and people scattered like birds before a hawk. Mara grabbed her coat and ran toward the commotion. By the time she arrived, a crowd had gathered at a safe distance. The scarred man was talking to Lydia's father, Mr. Crane, who looked terrified. Looking for Victor Hale. We were supposed to meet him here 3 days ago. Where is he? In jail, Mr. Crane stammered. Arrested for fraud. Sheriff took him to Sweetwater. The scarred man's expression darkened. On whose word? Mr. Crane's eyes flickered to Mara, and she knew she'd made a fatal mistake coming here. The scarred man followed his gaze. You. He started toward her, and his men followed. You the school teacher who got Victor arrested? Mara's throat was dry, but she forced herself to stand straight. I provided evidence of his crimes. The sheriff made the arrest. Evidence. The man spat in the dirt. Victor told us about you, said you were sticking your nose where it didn't belong. Said you were sweet on Caleb Boone. What Caleb and I are to each other is none of your business. It is when Boone owes us money, $30,000 to be exact. His share of the Cumberland job. The man stepped closer. See, Victor was supposed to collect, but since he's indisposed, we'll take it directly. Where's Boone? I don't know. Don't lie to me, girl. His hand dropped to his gun. We know he's got a cabin north of here. We'll find it with or without your help. Question is whether you're going to make this easy or hard. Before Mara could respond, Caleb's voice cut through the tension. I'm right here. He stood at the edge of the crowd, and Mara's heart lurched. He was alone, facing 6 armed men, and she knew with terrible certainty that he'd come to protect her. The scarred man smiled. Caleb Boone, been a long time. Not long enough, Dutch. Caleb's hand rested casually near his gun. What do you want? You know what I want. The money from Cumberland. Victor said it was gone, but I don't believe him. I think you squirreled it away somewhere, and I'm here to collect. Victor was telling the truth. The money's gone. Used it to start over, build my cabin, survive 5 winters. Caleb's voice was steady. There's nothing left. Then you'll work it off. Come with us. Help with a few jobs. We'll call it even. No. Dutch's smile vanished. That wasn't a request. Don't care. I'm done with that life. You want to kill me for it, go ahead, but I'm not riding with you again. How noble. Dutch glanced at Mara. And what about her? She is committed to this noble path as you are. Mara felt ice in her veins. Leave her out of this, Caleb said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Can't do that. See, we need leverage, and she seems like excellent leverage. Dutch gestured to his men. Grab her. 2 of them moved toward Mara. The crowd gasped, but nobody intervened. 6 armed men against unarmed townspeople was suicide. Then Emma Bennett threw a rock. It hit one of the men square in the temple. He staggered, cursing, and suddenly the whole town erupted. Mr. Johnson from the stable grabbed a shovel. Sarah Bennett had a kitchen knife. Even old Reverend Marsh appeared with a hunting rifle that looked older than he was. Touch her, Sarah snarled, and you'll regret it. Dutch laughed. You people are insane. We're offering you a way out. Let us take Boone and the girl. You all live. Refuse, and we'll burn this whole town to the ground. Then burn it. The voice came from an unexpected source, Lydia Crane. She stood in the doorway of her father's store, pale but defiant. We're not giving you anything. Mara stared. Lydia, who'd hated her, who'd undermined her at every turn, was standing up for her. Dutch's expression hardened. You've got 10 seconds to reconsider. 10, 9, 8. Wait! Mara stepped forward, ignoring Caleb's sharp protest. You said you needed leverage. Take me. Let the town go. Let Caleb go, and I'll come with you willingly. Mara, no, Caleb started. It makes sense, Mara continued, speaking quickly. You want money, and towns have money. Hold me hostage, demand a ransom. They'll pay to get their teacher back, more than you'd get from whatever jobs you had planned. Dutch considered this. How much? 5,000, Mara said, pulling the number from thin air. That's what the town can raise. That's less than Caleb owes us. But it's guaranteed, cash in hand within a week. No risk, no jobs, no law. Easy money. She could see him calculating. Behind her, she felt Caleb radiating fury, but she didn't turn around. If she looked at him, she'd lose her nerve. All right, Dutch said finally. But the second that money doesn't appear, I start sending pieces of you back, starting with fingers. Understood. Mara, don't do this, Caleb said, his voice rough. She finally turned to him. It's the only way. You know it is. It's suicide. It's strategy. She tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. Trust me, I have a plan. She didn't, not really, but she couldn't let Caleb see that. Dutch grabbed her arm, his grip painful. You try anything, you die. Understand? Perfectly. As they dragged her toward the horses, Mara caught Lydia's eye. For once, there was no malice there, just something that might have been respect or guilt. They rode for hours, stopping finally at an abandoned homestead 10 miles from Iron Hollow. Dutch shoved Mara into the old root cellar and locked the door. Someone will come check on you in the morning, he said through the wooden slats. Don't try anything stupid. Then she was alone in the darkness. Mara sat on the dirt floor, her back against the cold stone wall, and let herself shake. The bravado she'd shown in town drained away, leaving only fear. She'd bought time. Maybe a week before Dutch realized no ransom was coming, because of course the town didn't have $5,000. But what happened after that? She tried not to think about it. Above she could hear the men talking, drinking, laughing. One of them was wondering aloud how much Caleb would pay for her return. Another suggested creative uses for a hostage. Mara closed her eyes and tried to remember Caleb's face the last time she'd seen it. Anguished, furious, but alive. That was what mattered. He was alive, and the town was safe. For now. Hours passed. The voices above quieted as the men bedded down for the night. Mara tested the cellar door, but it was solid, locked from outside. The walls were stone, the floor packed earth. There was one tiny window near the ceiling, barely big enough for her arm. She was trapped. Then she heard it, the softest scrape of metal on metal. The lock was being picked. Mara pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering. If it was Dutch or his men, she was dead. If it was... The door opened. Caleb slipped inside, and Mara nearly sobbed with relief. How did you... Followed at a distance. Waited for them to sleep. He grabbed her hand. Come on, we need to move fast. They climbed out of the cellar into the cold night. The homestead was dark, the men asleep in the main building. Caleb had horses waiting 50 yards away, and they moved toward them with agonizing slowness, every twig snap sounding like a gunshot. They were almost there when someone shouted. They're escaping, Caleb swore, shoving Mara toward the horses. Ride, go! Not without you! Gunshots cracked through the night. Caleb returned fire, giving Mara precious seconds to mount. She wheeled the horse around just as Caleb swung onto his own. They rode hard into the darkness, bullets whining past them. Split up, Caleb shouted. Confuse them. Meet at the old Miller place. You know it? Yes. Mara had seen it on one of her rides, an abandoned farm east of town. They diverged, Caleb going north while Mara pushed east. Behind her, she heard the pursuit splitting too. At least 2 men were following her. She rode like her life depended on it, because it did. The horse was good, fast and sure-footed, but her pursuers were gaining. They knew this territory better than she did. A shot rang out. The horse screamed and stumbled. Mara barely managed to jump clear before the animal went down. She hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from her lungs. When she could breathe again, she scrambled to her feet and ran. The men were close now. She could hear them laughing, taking their time. They knew she couldn't outrun them. Mara's foot caught on something and she fell again, this time into a shallow ravine. She rolled, fetched up against a rock, and lay there trying to catch her breath. Above, the men reined in their horses. Where'd she go? Can't be far, probably hiding. Should we flush her out or wait for morning? Dutch wants her alive. Let's do this smart. They dismounted. Mara heard them moving through the brush, methodical and patient. In minutes, they'd find her. She looked around desperately. The ravine offered some cover, but nowhere to run. If she moved, they'd hear her. Then her hand touched something metal. She looked down. Half buried in the dirt was an old animal trap, rusted but intact, the kind farmers used for wolves. An idea formed. Terrible and risky, but the only chance she had. Moving as quietly as possible, Mara dug the trap free and set it, wincing as the springs creaked. Then she found the largest rock she could lift and waited. Footsteps above. Getting closer. I think she went down here. Careful, could be a drop-off. A man's silhouette appeared at the ravine's edge. He started down, his gun drawn. Mara threw the rock. It sailed past him and clattered against the far wall. The man spun toward the sound, and his foot came down directly on the trap. The jaws snapped shut with a sickening crunch. The man screamed. His partner came running. What happened? Are you... Mara was already moving. She grabbed a fallen branch and swung it with everything she had at the second man's knees. He went down hard. She didn't wait to see if he'd get up. She ran, scrambling up the opposite side of the ravine and into the trees. Behind her, men were shouting. More gunshots. But she kept running, branches tearing at her clothes, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't know how long she ran. Could have been minutes or hours. But eventually the sounds of pursuit faded, and she collapsed against a tree, her whole body shaking. She'd escaped. For now. But she was lost, alone in the wilderness, and Dutch still had 4 men out there hunting for her. Dawn found Mara stumbling through unfamiliar territory, exhausted and disoriented. She'd been trying to find the Miller place but had gotten turned around in the darkness. Now she had no idea where she was. She heard water and followed the sound to a small creek. As she knelt to drink, she saw smoke in the distance. A cabin. Maybe someone who could help. She approached cautiously, and her heart leaped when she recognized it. Caleb's cabin. She'd somehow circled back, and there, standing outside, was Caleb himself. Mara! He ran to her, catching her as her legs finally gave out. Thank heaven. I thought, when we didn't meet up, I thought they'd caught you. Almost did. She told him about the chase, the trap, the escape. He listened with an expression that cycled between pride, horror, and fury. You could have been killed, but I wasn't. Mara managed a weak smile. I'm getting good at not dying. Too good. You're supposed to be a school teacher, not a... He stopped, shaking his head. Come inside. You need rest. Inside the cabin was warm and safe. Caleb made her sit by the fire while he checked her over for injuries. She had cuts and bruises, but nothing serious. They'll come here, Mara said. Eventually, they'll figure out where you live and let them come. Caleb's voice was hard. I'm done running. Caleb, no, listen to me. He knelt in front of her, taking her hands. I've been running my whole life, from my past, from my mistakes, from connection. I built this place thinking isolation would keep me safe, but it just kept me alone. And then you showed up, stubborn, brave, refusing to let me hide. And you reminded me what it means to fight for something instead of running from it. Mara's throat tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying we end this. Today. Together. He stood, moving to a cabinet and pulling out weapons. Rifles, pistols, ammunition. They want to fight? We'll give them one. There's 6 of them. Well, 4 now, maybe. Still too many. Not if we're smart about it. Caleb started loading guns with practiced efficiency. This cabin's defensible. Good sight lines, thick walls. And I know this land better than they do. You're talking about a siege. I'm talking about survival. Theirs or ours. He looked at her. But if you want to run, I'll take you to Sweetwater right now. Get you somewhere safe. I'm not running either. Mara stood, her exhaustion falling away as determination set in. You're right. We end this. What do you need me to do? They spent the next hour preparing. Caleb positioned rifles at the windows, set up barriers, explained firing angles and reload procedures. Mara had never held a gun before, but she learned fast. When they come, Caleb said, they'll try to surround us. We can't let that happen. Keep them in front where we can see them. And if they try to burn us out, then we retreat to the root cellar. It's stone, won't burn, but I'd rather not let it get that far." They didn't have to wait long. Around noon, riders appeared on the horizon, 4 of them, just as Mara had guessed. Dutch in the lead, his scarred face twisted with fury. They stopped 100 yards out, just beyond rifle range. "Caleb Boone," Dutch's voice carried across the distance. "Send out the girl, and we'll let you live. Refuse, and we burn you out." "Come and try," Caleb shouted back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Dutch gave a signal, and his men spread out, circling the cabin. "Here we go," Caleb muttered. He took position at the front window while Mara covered the back. The first shot came from the east. It shattered the window next to Mara's head, and she ducked instinctively. "Return fire," Caleb called. "Don't let them get comfortable." Mara sighted down the rifle, aimed at the muzzle flash, and pulled the trigger. The recoil surprised her, slamming her shoulder back, but she'd hit something. She heard a yelp of pain. More shots. From multiple directions now, the cabin walls held, but the windows were exposed. "They're trying to pin us down," Caleb said. "Get us to waste ammunition. Don't shoot unless you have a clear target." Mara nodded, her heart pounding. This was insane. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and she couldn't believe she'd suggested fighting instead of running. Then she saw movement near the tree line. One of Dutch's men trying to get closer under cover. She aimed carefully and fired. The man went down. 3 left. The shooting intensified. Caleb returned fire methodically, making every shot count. Mara did her best to cover the angles he couldn't see. Minutes felt like hours. The air grew thick with gun smoke. Mara's ears rang from the constant noise. Then she smelled it. Smoke. Not gun smoke, wood smoke. "They're burning us out," she said. Caleb swore. "Back room. Now." They retreated as flames began licking at the cabin's exterior. Dutch's men had thrown torches onto the roof. "The cellar?" Mara asked. "Not yet. We can still—" The front door exploded inward. 2 men rushed in, guns blazing. Caleb shot the first one before he'd taken 3 steps. Mara fired at the second, but missed. The man returned fire, and Caleb grunted, staggering. "Caleb!" Mara screamed, but he was still moving, still fighting. He tackled the man, and they went down in a tangle of fists and fury. Mara couldn't get a clear shot without risking hitting Caleb. Then Caleb had the man's gun. He pressed it under the man's chin and fired. 2 left. Caleb stood, blood spreading across his shoulder. "I'm all right. It's just a graze." But Mara could see it was more than a graze, and the smoke was getting thicker. "Cellar," Caleb said. "Now, before the roof collapses." They stumbled toward the trap door leading down. Above, timbers were starting to crack. Mara pulled the door open and froze. Dutch stood at the bottom of the ladder, gun pointed up. "Going somewhere?" Before either of them could react, someone else appeared behind Dutch, someone Mara had never expected to see. Lydia Crane. She had a pistol pressed to the back of Dutch's head. "Drop it," Lydia said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Dutch started to turn. Lydia pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Dutch dropped like a stone. Lydia stood there, the gun smoking in her hand, looking shocked at what she'd done. "I followed them," she said numbly. "I followed them because I couldn't let—" She looked up at Mara. "I'm sorry for everything. I was jealous and petty and cruel, but I never wanted you dead. And when they took you, I realized—" Her voice broke. "I realized you were a better person than I'd ever be, and I couldn't let them win." Mara climbed down the ladder. Above, the cabin was collapsing, but she barely noticed. She pulled Lydia into a hug, and the other woman burst into tears. "Where's the last man?" Caleb asked, climbing down behind them. "I shot him," Lydia said, "when he wasn't looking. I'm not good at this, but I had to try." The 3 of them huddled in the cellar while the cabin burned above them. Eventually, the noise stopped, replaced by the crackle of dying flames. When they finally emerged, the cabin was gone, just smoking ruins and ash, but they were alive. The ride back to Iron Hollow was quiet. Caleb's shoulder needed stitching, but he insisted he was fine. Lydia rode in silence, still processing what she'd done. When they reached town, the whole population seemed to be waiting in the street. Sarah ran forward, pulling Mara into a fierce hug. "We were about to ride out looking for you. What happened?" Mara told them. About the escape, the chase, the siege. About Lydia's unexpected rescue. The town erupted. People thanking them, praising them, offering help and support. Someone produced whiskey. Sarah took charge of Caleb's shoulder, stitching it with the efficiency of someone who'd done field medicine before. And Lydia stood apart, watching everything with an expression Mara couldn't quite read. Mara approached her. "You saved our lives." "I almost got you killed first. Not exactly heroic. You came when it mattered. That's what counts." Mara held out her hand. "Thank you." Lydia looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then she took it. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said quietly. "I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know I see now what everyone else saw. You're strong, brave, everything I pretended to be but wasn't. You were brave today. I was terrified today. I just did it anyway." Lydia managed a small smile. Maybe that's what bravery is. Maybe it is. They stood like that for a moment. Two women who'd been enemies finding unexpected common ground in survival. Then Reverend Marsh cleared his throat. "Miss Ellison, Mr. Boone, the town council would like to speak with you if you're up for it." The meeting was short. The council, Marsh, Sarah, Mr. Crane, and several others, sat around a table looking serious. "First," Marsh said, "we want to thank you, both of you. You saved this town from a threat we didn't even know existed." "We did what anyone would do," Mara said. "No, you did what heroes do." Mr. Crane leaned forward. "And we want to make sure you're properly compensated. Mr. Boone, your cabin is gone. We'll help you rebuild. Materials, labor, whatever you need." Caleb looked stunned. "I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. We're offering," Sarah smiled. "Besides, we can't have our local hero living in a tent." "Local hero," Caleb repeated, like the words were foreign. "That's right. Whether you like it or not, you're part of this community now." Marsh turned to Mara. "And Miss Ellison, the school board has voted unanimously to give you a permanent position, plus a raise. You've more than earned it." Mara felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, all of you." "One more thing," Mr. Crane said, "about the land. Victor's scheme may have failed, but it exposed a real problem. Our valley is vulnerable to that kind of takeover. We need to organize, create a water cooperative, get everyone's deeds properly registered, make sure no one can pull that trick again." "We'll need someone to manage it," Sarah added. "Someone good with numbers and organization. Know anyone who fits that description?" Mara blinked. "Are you asking me to run the cooperative?" "Yes. Part-time, alongside teaching. We'll pay you for both, of course." "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Caleb murmured beside her. "Yes," Mara said, her voice stronger. "Yes, I'll do it." The meeting ended with handshakes and promises. As Mara and Caleb left the building, she felt lighter than she had in months. They walked through town slowly, Caleb favoring his injured shoulder. "Where will you stay while we rebuild?" Mara asked. "Sarah offered me a room at the boarding house. Said she won't take no for an answer." "Sounds like Sarah." They reached the schoolhouse. Mara's small quarters seemed even smaller after everything that had happened. "You could stay here," she said, then felt her face heat. "I mean, there's a spare room, sort of. It's not much, but—" "Mara," Caleb turned to face her. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" "Temporarily, until your cabin's rebuilt. Unless you'd rather—" He kissed her. It was gentle despite his size, careful despite the violence they'd just survived. His hand cupped her face like she was something precious. When they broke apart, Mara was breathless. "Is that a yes?" she managed. "That's a yes." He smiled. "Though people will talk." "Let them. I'm done caring what people think." "Good." He kissed her again. "Because I plan on giving them plenty to talk about." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Caleb's cabin rose from the ashes, the whole town pitching in. Men who'd once viewed him with suspicion now worked alongside him, laughing and sharing stories. Women brought food. Children helped carry tools. Mara divided her time between teaching, organizing the water cooperative, and helping with the rebuild. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Lydia, surprisingly, became an unexpected ally. She helped with the cooperative's paperwork and never once made a snide remark. The transformation wasn't complete, She still had her moments of vanity and sharp words, but she was trying. "I'm leaving," she told Mara one afternoon. "Going to stay with my aunt in Denver. Fresh start." "Will you come back?" "Maybe. Someday. When I've figured out who I am without all this," she gestured vaguely at the town, "expectation." "I understand that." "I know you do. That's why you'll be fine here. You've already figured yourself out." Lydia paused. "For what it's worth, I think you and Caleb will be happy. You fit together in a way I never could have with him." "Thank you for saying that." "Don't thank me. Just be happy. That's how you win. Not by destroying your enemies, but by being so completely yourself that they can't touch you." She left the next morning, and Mara watched her wagon disappear over the horizon with a feeling of closure. Spring arrived. The valley turned green, and Caleb's cabin stood finished, bigger than before, with a second bedroom and a porch that wrapped around two sides. "Room to grow," he explained when Mara questioned the size. "Grow into what?" "I don't know yet, but I figure we'll figure it out together." They stood on that porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Mara leaned against him, feeling his warmth, his solidness. "I've been thinking," Caleb said, "about the future." "What about it?" "About making this permanent. Us permanent." Mara's heart jumped. "Caleb Boone, are you proposing?" "Not yet. But I'm letting you know I plan to. Soon. If you'd want—" "Yes." He blinked. "Yes? Yes, I'd want that. Yes, I'll say yes when you ask. Yes to all of it." Mara turned to face him fully. "I came to Iron Hollow thinking I was settling for less, a job nobody else wanted in a place nobody else cared about. But I wasn't settling. I was finding home. I was finding you. Mara, and I know we're not perfect. We're both broken in different ways. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the cracks are what let the light in." Caleb kissed her then, slow and deep, and Mara felt something settle in her chest. Not completion. She'd never needed another person to complete her. But partnership. Recognition. Two people choosing each other despite and because of their imperfections. When they broke apart, Caleb smiled. "I love you, just so we're clear on that." "I love you too, just so you know." They stood like that as darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, watching stars emerge one by one above the valley they'd fought to protect. Months later, Mara stood in front of her class, watching Emma work a complicated division problem on the board. The girl got it right, and the class applauded. "Excellent work," Mara said. "Who's next?" Daniel Pratt raised his hand. "Miss Ellison, is it true you're getting married next month?" The class erupted in excited chatter. Mara smiled. "Yes, Daniel, it's true." "Will you still be our teacher?" "Of course, though it'll be Mrs. Boone instead of Miss Ellison." "Will Mr. Boone help teach sometimes?" Emma asked. "He knows lots about tracking and hunting and stuff." "Maybe we can arrange that. Would you like that?" A chorus of yes. Mara looked at her students, these children who'd accepted her without hesitation, who'd seen past her size and her background to the person underneath. They were the future of Iron Hollow, and she was helping shape them. It was the most important work she'd ever done. That evening, she walked to Caleb's cabin, soon to be their cabin. He was waiting on the porch, and she could smell something cooking inside. "You made dinner?" "Tried to. Can't promise it's good." It wasn't good. It was slightly burned and under-seasoned. But they ate it together, laughing at Caleb's culinary failures, planning the wedding, talking about everything and nothing. Later, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Mara thought about the woman she'd been when she first arrived. Scared, defensive, convinced she'd never be enough. She'd been wrong. She was enough. Had always been enough. She just needed to find people who could see it. And now, surrounded by community, teaching children who adored her, planning a life with a man who loved her exactly as she was, Mara Ellison finally understood what belonging felt like. It felt like home. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked, his arm around her shoulders. "How far I've come. How much has changed. Any regrets?" "Not a single one." She leaned into him. "You?" "Only that I didn't meet you sooner. We found each other when we needed to. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd been told they didn't fit finding they fit perfectly together. In town, lights flickered in windows, smoke rose from chimneys, normal life continuing in the valley they'd saved. And Mara realized that this quiet moment of peace and love and belonging was worth more than all the approval she'd ever sought from people who couldn't see her value. She'd stopped trying to be what others wanted. She'd become exactly who she was meant to be. And that, she thought as Caleb pressed a kiss to her temple, was the only victory that mattered. The frontier had tested her, broken her, rebuilt her stronger. And she'd survived it all by refusing to quit, refusing to shrink, refusing to accept anyone else's definition of her worth. In the end, that was the real lesson. Not that she needed to prove herself to anyone, but that she'd always been enough, exactly as she was. The world just needed to catch up. And if it didn't, well, she'd shown what happened to people who underestimated her. She'd faced blizzards and outlaws and her own worst fears. And she'd won. Not by becoming someone else, but by being completely, unapologetically herself. Mara Ellison had come to Iron Hollow as the wrong kind of woman. She'd stayed as exactly the right kind of person, and that made all the difference.